Coming up next, The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy. Every Thursday from 4 p.m, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
People are struggling to have conversations and connect with others that they don't completely agree with on every topic. And I think that's probably the biggest problem that we need to try and solve, is how after all this division and after all this separation do we end up bringing people together again, and what does unity really look like?
New Zealand faces some pretty big issues. First one is COVID and the aftermath. There's no getting away from that. Second is racial division. It's been ginned up and it's dangerous. Another issue that maybe people haven't got their head around yet is digital currency. What form does that take? Is it programmable? Will it be used to manipulate behaviour and patterns of behaviour? Those questions need to be asked and answered.
How can you have fair, open, democratic government by people who are appointed? It's a ridiculous idea. And if that idea is taken to its zenith, then this country is in real trouble, because democracy, one person, one vote, where every vote is of equal value, has got to be the foundation of a modern New Zealand.
What's true, what's not true, how our kids are to be educated. And, I have a great fear for the future. I think we know from history where this could end up.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Welcome to The Crunch on Reality Check Radio. I'm your host, Cam Slater, and this is the place where we crunch the political issues and cut through all the politicians' spin. Now, I'm taking a bit of a breather from politics this week, though we will touch on it a bit in my education chat with Alwyn Poole on the state of our education system. And then I'm going to have a catch-up with Gary Moller again. And it's a very popular segment every time I chat with Gary about my health journey. It's been 6 weeks since we last caught up on his solutions for my health, and we're going to talk about his super smoothies and how they have worked out for me. Stay tuned. This will be interesting. And I'll also be interested to see what he has to say for where to next. And we will, of course, hear from Cam's buddies and see what they have to say about the ongoing debate over the special rooms set aside at Auckland University on the basis of race. And, of course, we'll get to the mailbag so that we can get your feedback. Don't forget to send comments to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057. Today I want to talk about the Greens and the new co-leader Chloe Swarbrick, particularly focusing on the recent clash between the Green Party and the government's 36-point action plan that Christopher Luxon announced on Tuesday. Now let's get straight to it. So we've heard the Greens' response to the government's 36-point plan, calling it PR spin and as pointless as it is hollow. Chloe Swarbrick, the co-leader of the Greens, took a direct hit at Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, suggesting the plan is detached from reality and evidence. But let's take a step back and ponder. Is it really the government that's untethered from reality, or perhaps the Greens themselves? The Greens seem to be painting themselves as the champions of meaningful solutions, and yet their critique lacks substance. Swarbrick questions the vague nature of the plan, but isn't her own criticism equally vague? Instead of offering concrete alternatives, she chooses to throw stones from her glass house. It's very easy to criticise, but much harder to propose real solutions. And what about Swarbrick's assertion that the plan is focused on environmental destruction and trickle-down economics? Well, that's a bold claim, but where's the evidence? It's easy to toss around buzzwords and slogans, but without backing them up with facts, it's just empty rhetoric. We saw that from Ardern, and now we're seeing it from Swarbrick. And let's consider the the Labour Party's response. Deputy Leader Carmel Sepuloni echoes the sentiment that our country isn't a company and shouldn't be run like one. I suppose it's a fair point, but does that mean we shouldn't strive for efficiency and accountability in government? We saw what happens when you run a government like a drunken sailor. Grant Robertson's borrowings were the largest of any government in New Zealand ever. And what do we have to show for it? Well, pretty much nothing. The 36-point plan, flawed as it may be, at least attempts to outline priorities and set goals. Isn't that what responsible governance is all about? Meanwhile, ACT leader David Seymour proudly declares that his party's policies make up half of the actions in the plan. Well, love them or hate them, ACT is undeniably making waves within the coalition government. It's a reminder that politics is a game of compromise, and sometimes the loudest voices aren't always the most influential. So as we dissect the latest political drama, let's remember to question not only the actions of our leaders, but also the motives behind the critics. Are the Greens and Chloe Swarbrick truly the arbiters of reality, or are they simply playing their part in the never-ending game of political theatre? And that's for you, our listeners, to decide. Alwyn Poole is an education specialist with a passion for learning. He's been instrumental in setting up charter schools, has a real passion for breaking through with kids with learning difficulties. And we're going to have a chat about the state of education in New Zealand. Alwyn is on the line now. Welcome to The Crunch.
Thanks, Cameron. And I won't call you whale as John Banks did last week because, I feel there's something derogatory in that.
Oh, no. Banksy and I have known each other for 40-odd years. So, he calls me whale. That's just a term of endearment from the old whale oil days, but that's okay. Now, you were instrumental or involved deeply in charter schools when they existed. You've got a passion for education. What sort of marks would you give this government since it was formed in October on education? And let's talk about Erica Stanford as well as the minister in charge.
Yeah. If we can bump it back just a term, and I think I saw an interview that included Erica Stanford and Willie Jackson on the weekend.
Yep.
And Erica presented really well about the amount of work they need to do. And Willie said, well, Erica has got a big job, but so did Jan Tinetti. And what Labor has been at pains to do is point out that Jan Tinetti was the Minister of Education, when the truth is that for more than 5 years... Chris
Hipkins was the minister, wasn't he?
Chris Hipkins was the Minister of Education. And arguably, I'd say statistically, the worst Minister of Education we have seen. He did nothing. His only legacy was throwing out national standards without any sort of replacement, and saying and throwing out the charter school model, him, Ardern, and others promising that significant work would be done on the designated character school model. They didn't do any of it. They had applications during their term from people like, I'd think Nathan and Yvette Jury are New Zealand's best educators. People like Nathan and Yvette, myself, Francis Valentine, and others to set up really high-quality designated character schools. The ministry, no doubt, from the minister, said no to all of them, and then justified why. So Erica's come in and National have come in on the basis of a real disaster. Last year, certainly the education sector didn't help themselves. We had, on top of the sort of COVID response that was still impacting, we had this proliferation of teacher-only days, and almost all of them taken either before or after a weekend, or after a holiday, or after a long weekend. Yeah. We had strike days, and not only strike days, but a significant number of paid union meetings. We've got this situation, and unfortunately, one of the charter schools that I'm not involved with these schools now, but one of the charter schools I set up, first of all, went on strike, and I just about fell out of my tree. They then started taking teacher-only days, and I've always said you simply cannot put kids from Decile 1 families, Decile 1, 2, 3 even, on the street, because these teachers have got 12 weeks holidays a year. They've got callback days in their contract, which schools don't use. The good parents in that situation will take a day's leave to look after their kids, or they'll pay. And they only have 4 weeks leave a year, if that. And so that's pretty bad. And then we've got, and again, I saw one of those schools, but plenty of other schools having their parent interviews during the day, and sending kids home. And so you've got this crazy situation where we've got 38% of Māori and Pacifica kids attending full-time.
That's
10,000
atrocious.
kids. It's atrocious. 10,000 kids in the wind. In other words, no one knows where they are. Everyone knows there's an attendance crisis, and yet schools are behaved that way last year. And Stanford was really critical, and I think rightly so, of Tineti, who was minister at the time, for not getting the Term 3 2024-23 attendance stats out before the election. The Term 4 ones are not coming out till April as well. Well, that was something to kick off with. So how have they done so far? I felt that the key thing to show from the moment they got elected was genuine public-facing leadership.
Yeah.
And whether that's Erica Stanford or David Seymour as the associate minister, I felt that from November, December, through January into February, that they would be absolutely banging on about school attendance. And, every press release, every chance they got to speak, schools do a better job, contact your parents, involve the families, get your kids to school. And we heard nothing of it until, I think, well into February, where Luxon and Stanford went to Browns Bay Primary.
Yeah.
Hardly the heart of problematic education, and mentioned it there. And Luxon said, families across New Zealand have got to be responsible for getting their kids into school. And then this morning, Luxon said that, Seymour is in charge of that policy, and there'll be announcements coming out soon. Well, it's April, and the announcements sound, at the moment, and let's wait and see a little bit, like they will be in and around punishing parents as opposed to necessarily improving school quality. And that's, I'm not sure how that's going to work. The banning of cell phones, in principle, sounds like a good idea. They messed up the announcement of that to me, because there are a lot of kids who have needs, different ways of learning, who have depended on their cell phones for doing things like taking photos of notes off the board. You've got kids with significant anxiety trying to get back into school, and being able to contact a parent, at breaks and lunch times is a big part of their...
How's this come to... I hear this anxiety thing a lot.
Yeah.
It almost seems like a crutch or an excuse for any sort of behaviour. I know that they have high anxiety, and so they're having a day off school here because, mental health day. And I can't count the number of parents that I've heard say, oh no, Sebastian or Matilda is having a day off for their mental health. And I'm sitting there thinking, when I was a kid, even if I had a drippy nose, Mum was booting me out the door and saying, go to school. I had to be pretty damn sick for me to get a day off school.
Yeah. There's a mix. I is obviously going back a little bit, but in my, what was Form 2, I don't know, had you would probably call it a depression. And, and for the first term, I my parents did. I don't know whether I told them or not, but I faked an illness.
Yeah.
Fairly successfully. Managed to get myself in hospital twice.
You're pretty good at it then, weren't you?
I know, I was. Yeah, it wasn't until the psychologist at Waikato Hospital sort of caught me out one day not coughing, and we had a chat, and he was great.
Yeah.
And but so I think that was a genuine anxiety, and it probably wasn't until my mid-40s that. Because I carried that anxiety, I still do, but I carried that anxiety and sort of white-knuckled it for a long time. So there will be a core of kids for whom that's a part of their makeup. And how you deal with that requires a heck of a lot of skilled parenting. We've had, in the schools that I've operated, we've had kids who you would call genuinely school averse. They... But I think you're right. The projected problem is bigger than the actual problem.
It's an interesting term you use there, projected problem, because I can remember when my kids were younger and at intermediate school, and we got called up to go see the school, and they decided that they had a label that they wanted to apply to my son.
Yep.
And the crux of it was not that they wanted to do anything, but they wanted additional funding, and so we needed to label somebody so they could then apply to the ministry to get teacher aides. And I said to them, well, the problem you've got at your school is that you've decided to bus in a whole lot of Decile 1 kids from down south into a Decile 10 area so that you could jimmy the system to get more money that way. And as a result, these kids are bigger physically, right, than European kids or Chinese kids. And there was a prevalence of Chinese and Europeans in the school, but a large cohort of Pacifica and Maori children from down south. And they're bigger. And you use the term bullying, but, I'm a realist in life, and there is a pecking order. And you see it in chickens, you see it in any type of animal, and humans are animals, and so you see it again in schools. You call it bullying, but it's not really. And so you've got a problem there, but you want to solve the problem by labeling the kids that are different with a label, and then stick a teacher aide with them, and then exacerbate the bullying because now they're a special kid. Yeah. And kids are cruel. They just are, right? And
it depends what's modeled to them. I like a lot of what you're saying. We had a boy at Mount Hobson who had Tourette's. Now, it was the first child I taught with Tourette's. And there's a couple of things came of it. Neat kid, and at times distraught by his situation. He didn't often swear, but there was one situation where a kid came sprinting down the drive. I had a whole lot of parents in my office. A kid came sprinting down the drive and said, just call him Brian. Brian just called me a mother.
Yeah.
And I went, what? Shush. Well, he called me, and he repeated it 2 or 3 times. And I said, look, he didn't. Yes, he did. He called me a mother. Yeah. And I went, no. You know how he has tics? Well, yes, but he never swears. Well, I said, this time he did. Yeah. I can guarantee it. And he wasn't calling you it. And he goes, well, I'm still telling my parents. And I said, that's okay. You can tell your parents, but don't use the term. But one of the things with this kid is he would greet people and he would say, hi, I'm Brian and I've got Tourette's.
Yeah.
And I'd say, no.
Yeah, hi, I'm Brian. Pleased to meet you.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm a cool guy.
Yeah.
And let's it's a really simple way of saying whether it's ADHD, whether it's dyslexia, anxiety, all of those things, they can't define you. And with something like dyslexia, ultimately, for that child to be successful, they have to work harder.
Yeah, They have to learn. They've got different learning styles. I mean, this is the bugbear I've always had with schools, going back to my experience. Now we're going to talk about schools and rankings a little bit later on, in the interview. But I went to Auckland Grammar, and they streamed people, and they still stream people. And I came home from school after the first day of exams, and told that I was in 3C. So ABC, 30 kids in each class, or more like 35 in each class, I think it was back then, all squeezed in. And, Dad thought I should have been in 3A. And so he went up and talked to the headmaster. We didn't have principals back then. It was a headmaster. It was
I
John
think it
Graham.
still is there.
Yep, it was John Graham, lived across the road from the school. And he said, no, the exams are right. That's where your boy belongs. If he wants to be in 3A or 3B, well, he needs to, take the first term, sit the exams at the end of the first term and do better. And of course, I was in that class where everybody in that class knew that we could be in 3A or 3B, but we couldn't be bothered doing the work. So we were a teacher's nightmare. And I was like that all the way through school.
Yeah.
And, I remember in the third form, the parent-teacher meetings, like you touched, they were in the evening, right?
Yes.
And mum went up to the school and the form teacher said, oh, your son's very difficult to teach. And she said, oh, really? Why is that? She said, oh, well, it's like he reads encyclopedias. And my mother said, well, he does. He comes home from school and grabs a piece of cake or a cookie or a glass of water, sits down and he'll pick a world book or an Encyclopedia Britannica, whatever takes his fancy, and he'll read it from cover to cover and he won't put it down till 5 o'clock. So yeah, he does.
Yeah.
But the impression that I got from schooling and then bringing my own kids up through the schooling system is that they love bell-shaped curves. And of course, reality doesn't like that.
No, exactly.
And, they don't cater for people at either end of the bell-shaped curve. And the challenges of teaching a super bright person as opposed to what I facetiously call dullards, but, they're the same. They're the same challenges. You've got to keep them interested in education.
I work a bit, keep up correspondence with John Hattie, who is arguably, the world's best meta-researcher for education. Mm. And the nature of our conversation in brief is John to say, well, this is what the data says, and me to say, and it's my job to change it. Mm. And with that kind of bell-shaped curve, the teaching learning philosophy that I go with is that, and it's got a lot behind it, but every student can develop exceptional learning skills.
Absolutely.
And knowledge sets with expert teaching, coaching, mentorship, significant purposeful practice, and opportunities to express themselves. And there's very little in cognitive science, etc., to say that the bell-shaped curve should exist. And a lot of that, as you say, is schools delight in it because it gives them an excuse. I went to, and I'll come back to national in a sec, but I went down to a school a few years ago to check that what I was teaching and writing for curriculum for the schools I was involved in was good for year 10 science. Mm. So I went and I saw a head of department at a school that at that stage I had respect for. And I said, what do you do for year 10 science? What do you do to really, get these kids fired up and interested? And he said, Alwyn, you got to understand, it's a big school. And I went, yeah. And he went, well, all we want to do in year 10 is find out who can from who can't. And
unbelievable.
But that is incredibly common. Mount Hobson, we got a lot of kids who had a background that was not conducive in terms of heading towards really good academic results. Mm. We taught them all as if they could. We probably failed over 18 years on maybe, 5 occasions, which is not bad, but still I don't like the 5. 97% of those kids got at least level 1 NCA and well into the 70s, I think, went on to university entrance and things like that. We had advantages in that we were small. We were, by definition, I guess we had most of the parents were supportive, but we scholarshiped a lot of kids in who couldn't afford it. And that, to me, that's the approach that we need in our schools, not a bell-shaped curve. So I guess the feedback that they're getting from the cell phone ban is mostly positive. I don't think it's working for the kids who are not going to school, and I think it needed to be accompanied by a really good program working with parents, because the school's only got those kids for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
So are they going home and binging on their phones from there? Are parents aware that no kid should be behind a closed door with an internet capable device because they'll see things that they can't unsee? How are parents doing with having the phones on top of the fridge at, say, 8 o'clock at night? Are they having phone-free dinners so they can, all of those sorts that
See, what you and I were brought up when there were no cell phones.
I've only got one for very rare occasions now.
Yeah. I mean, the first time I had a cell phone that I bought myself that wasn't related to work, I was 30 years old.
Right.
So up until then, I seemed to have managed to get through life without cell phones. I certainly got through school without cell phones.
Yes.
And I can remember at school, there was a great fuss about calculator watches and stuff like that. And, oh, dude, it's terrible, you could cheat and all of that sort of thing. Well, the smartest amongst us, we had devised methods of cheating that teachers hadn't even thought of. Because we didn't like to do an awful lot of work. We went to school to eat our lunch in many respects because school wasn't a challenge. And I remember in the 7th form, I remember my English teacher who said that he wrote on my first exam in the 7th form, he'd given me 75%, but I looked at the paper and I'd actually got 95%. The teacher was annoyed with me because I didn't do any classwork and I didn't hand in any essays or things like that. And so the guy who got second in the class had got 78%. And so he scaled me down to 75%, so I'd come second to the guy who got 78. And he wrote on my report, a splendid exam result achieved with little obvious effort. And, he handed me my report and grinned at me and said, "We'll see what your parents say about that." Yeah. And I just laughed like hell. I said, "Thank you so much for the compliment, sir." His name was Graham Marshall. He went on to become the principal of Hutt Valley High School.
Right.
And I remember it to this day, and then what I worked out is all I had to do was hand in about 50% of the essays and homework and stuff like that, and I'd still pass and I wouldn't get scaled back and I'd get it. So I ended up walking, first time in my entire secondary school life, walking across the stage and shaking John Graham's hand, getting an award for a prize for English, only because I played to the strengths of the petulant teacher.
My boys went to grammar and in lots of other experiences. I could write a book on it, and
so could I.
Only one very short chapter would be positive. And Tim O'Connor went on with Bruce Cottrell the other day on ZB Plus, and Tim O'Connor's the headmaster there, and boasted that they had an 86% UE pass rate for leavers. Well, their statistic is 74%. And I knew I wouldn't get a reply from Tim, but I did write to him and point it out. And I don't regard it as a good school. I think the students there come from good families who pretty much push their kids along, and a lot of the kids become motivated by competition. But I asked my boys, how many good teachers did you have at grammar? And they sort of stared at me, and then they sat down and talked to each other and counted and came back with 5.
Oh, over
10 combined years.
Yeah, I think mine would be about 2.
Right.
I'll give you a good example. In the 5th form, I had Rory Barrett as a maths teacher. Now, he is lauded all around the country as perhaps New Zealand's best maths teacher. And let me tell you how Rory Barrett taught our class. He was never in the class.
Yeah.
He would get a prefect to come in and write on the board to read pages 29 to 30 of this textbook. It might be calculus or whatever, and answer the questions on page 41. And we'd never see him. That's how he taught maths at Auckland Grammar School.
It took me a while with some kids I taught. I'd say, "Well, how did you get this one right?" And they go, "Bob helped." Took me a long time. I mean, I must be a bit of a social dummy. But after a month, I finally said, "Well, Flip, who's Bob?" "Oh, back of book, sir."
Yeah, back of book.
And I was like, dear. So in terms of, the cell phone thing, decreasing distractions in class, that can't be a bad thing. I
was the worst student, distractions in class. I was the distraction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember one teacher at grammar, Paul Forder was his name, an economics teacher. I actually quite liked the guy. He'd be writing on the board, scratching away, and he'd say, Slater, if I hear your voice one more time, I'm going to cane you. And then I'd pipe up from the back of the class, sir, if you tried to cane me, I'd laugh in your face. so it kind of backfired every time.
Yeah, I think that's why, I found myself being a pretty good classroom teacher because I'd done everything. And I'd learned to laugh with kids as opposed to at them. And if they managed to really get one over me, to laugh at that too.
I always felt that the teachers that I had were intent on humiliating students.
Yeah.
And I actually think that a lot of my teachers were bullies.
I agree. And I talked with Michael Laws a bit, and we both went to the same school, him about 10 years before me. It's an appalling school. Wanganui Boys College. At the time it was appalling. We called ourselves survivors because we were one of the very few to get out of the town and into a university. At the moment, they have no students graduating going into universities, and they've got the UE pass rate at about 1.5% for leavers. But even back then, I remember we had a swarm of earthquakes. Would have been 1983, and these earthquakes would come through the exam hall. And while everyone was in commotion, people were just passing their papers around the hall. So, kids are ingenious, and the results went up because of the swarm of earthquakes. The back to basics, the 3 hours math, reading and writing, again, in principle, sounds pretty good.
But what will happen in reality? Teachers are pretty woke and liberal, and they don't really, you never hear them going on strike when there's a Labour government in, but as soon as there's a national-led government in, there's all sorts of strikes and industrial actions, and they go to war with the education minister. What's the reality going to be in these schools? Are they actually going to do an hour of reading, writing, and maths a day?
There's some complications. So one is that a number of schools already are. Keep in mind the schools did strike under Hipkins and Tinetti, probably because they saw them as pushovers.
Yeah.
Some schools they'd already worked to that extent. There are a tremendous amount of primary school teachers who are not capable of teaching math well, let alone science. So I would argue that we have a lifelong learning system called NCEA, that every primary school teacher should have level 2 math and a level 2 science, as well as a level 2 English. And once they've got that, they're far more capable of teaching it. So to me, that would be a priority. As Dame Wendy Pye, who I think is an absolute New Zealand treasure that the ministry ignores, and who produces Sunshine Books and is axial in education in places like Singapore, China, does work in the Middle East and South Africa, etc. How are you going to get a 5-year-old to write for an hour? And then, of course, in your curriculum, so a primary school's got 5 hours in a day. And if you were to look at that, you would say, well, I do want them to do some math, some reading, some writing. I want them to exercise. The New Zealand history curriculum is compulsory each year. I want them to get the basics of science, and science is probably one of the most exciting, important subjects for kids. And there are all of these other things, and I think a lot of schools are just getting, art, when are we going to fit all this in? And I think some of this is the literacy and the numeracy is really important. And you can't do math effectively unless you can read well. People forget that too. They think reading and writing is letters and math is numbers. It isn't. You've got to be able to understand the problem to be able to do it. So we're talking about incredibly important things. and we're going to talk as we go on about some parenting stuff. My children have grown up and done pretty well. I'll never forget them sitting in a lounge one day and someone saying, well, how come you guys are pretty good at academics? And my daughter said, well, the only thing Dad did well when we were growing up, which my ears pricked up because I'd hoped there would have been several, but it was that I sat on the couch and read to them every night from the time they were 2 till the time they were about 14. But it wasn't just, we did read. We read incredible books. We read classics. We read Roald Dahl. We read C.S. Lewis, Lord of the Rings, all sorts of stuff. Fenimore Cooper. And so they were steeped in literacy. And I knew, and I don't know how, I obviously read it somewhere, I hardly come up with the original thought, but that you read above a child's cognitive, above their skill level into their cognitive level.
It drags them up, doesn't it?
Yeah, because they can understand story even if they can't extract it themselves. And, my son asked me to start reading him The Lord of the Rings before he was 3. And I kind of looked at him and said, well, I don't know. I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll start reading. It took me 8 months. But you have to tell me what happened the night before each time we read. And his brain could deal with it. There was no way he was going to read it, of course. And I think if we're going to improve literacy, etc., we need to go to parents and say, hey, you know what? You need to be reading to your kids.
Well, Alan Duff was talking about that, wasn't he? With trying to get books. There's people who've got kids in the house and there's not a book to be seen in the whole place. I had so many books when I was young. We had encyclopedias. We had Encyclopedia Britannica and World Book. Mum was a voracious reader. Dad was a reader as well. I think I was reading James A. Michener books at 10. That sort of stuff. I'd just go and have a look at what was on the shelf. We almost had a library. If we didn't have a book there, well, Mum would take us to the library.
Yeah.
And that's not happening these days. Everyone's got devices, but they're not reading, they're not understanding.
Yeah, it would go a significant way to saving the numeracy and literacy situation. It would assist schools a great deal, and we put it in the too hard baskets. So again, in principle, this emphasis on math, particularly with what the Royal Society said under Labor, which Labor said there's great ideas and then ignored it. I think that's a big deal. We're ignoring science, and I think that's because it's less measurable, particularly internationally, than the others.
Well, I know how to get people excited in science, particularly boys.
Yep.
If you teach them how to blow things up.
The best day at Mount Holston that we had each year was to bring in CO2 pastels.
Oh, of course. You put them in a Coke bottle with a bit of water, put the lid on, and you've got a bomb.
Unbelievable. and just superb. And one day we forgot to tell the childcare centre next door what was going on. But no, you're right. Kids absolutely adore it. We used to bring this guy we do a flight and space project.
Yeah.
And this guy called Jerry Munston who built rockets, model rockets. And he'd be firing them off in the backyard. No idea where they landed. But the kids.
Well, we used to learn about science on Guy Fawkes Day, didn't we?
Absolutely.
If you hold on to this, it'll hurt your fingers. Experiential learning.
The old, it was my friends who blew up letterboxes, but the old double happy in the top of a can
or a trifle
in a pot of water. And you'd send this can 30 feet into the air. So there's a lot that can be done, and I think science is neglected. And you go back to reading. I always say to families, one of the books you must have in your home is the illustrated version of Bill Bryson's The Short History of Nearly Everything, because a kid will read that and they're hooked.
Well, what we did with our son is we got him horrible histories.
Right. Yep.
And he just read those voraciously, and it was a light-hearted, look at, a vicious Vikings, and they had all sorts of things like that.
Yeah.
It was targeted specifically at boys.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, he's got a good working general knowledge and understanding of history.
And there's so much more you can learn. I thought I knew a little bit about some of the aspects of the bomb development at the end of World War II. I'm currently watching Oppenheimer on Netflix.
It's amazing, isn't it?
20 minutes a night. I'm stunned by just about everything, including the acting.
I love the bit where he says to Einstein, "Yeah, I want you to have a look at this. At this equation." Because they couldn't work it out. The generals were saying, "Well, what are your scientists saying about the equation? What happens if we set one off in the atmosphere?" And he said, "Well, we could burn the Earth to a crisp. Could set off a chain reaction." So what did Einstein say? Einstein said, "Well, the only way you're going to find out is to let one off." It's classic boys' own stuff, isn't it? Oh, we don't know how big this is going to be. Maybe we'll stand back a bit.
Yeah, it's stunning, and kids respond. When we set up South Auckland Middle School and Middle School West Auckland as charter schools, one of our projects, the beginning of year 10, the second project is Shakespeare, and people sort of look at you and go, "What?" And they love it. And when that globe, the pop-up globe was on in Auckland.
Yeah.
So they are talking of bringing back charter schools. Again, there's a lot of people in society who are interested. I've got at least 6 groups who want to work with me.
Yeah.
I've got 2 opportunities already in terms of buildings, etc. It's going to be incredibly important that they establish this model in a way
that it can't be undone.
David's talking about state schools being able to transfer. That's cool. I think small private schools should have the same opportunity. He says the bigger private schools will cost the government too much money. If they did, I don't think they would anyway, because they wouldn't get the funding that they need to maintain the schools like King's and St. Cuth's.
Yeah.
The key element, or 2 of them combined, is that the ministry have nothing to do with the approval and monitoring, that it's established as a separate entity. And the second one is that the approval has nothing to do with the current network. So if we go back to Wanganui Boys College, education in Wanganui is appalling. Both Wanganui High School and Wanganui City College, Wanganui Girls, Colour Lane, they're all very low performers. Collegiate's okay, but most of the kids come from elsewhere anyway. But if I went to Wanganui and said, "Look, I'd like to set up a charter school down here and try and improve things," at the moment I'd be told by the ministry no, because there are 500 empty desks at Wanganui City College.
Yeah, but they're all out on the street setting fire to letterboxes and, doing ram raids and all that sort of stuff because they're not at school.
Correct. So that's one of the big problems. If the ministry have got a hand in this, it will not succeed in the way that it should. So that's another policy they have in place. Clearly, the school lunches is up for debate. I was meeting with someone this morning and they said, what was done about attendance? And I said, well, they had a select committee meeting, investigation of 2,600 schools, 8 schools submitted. So how seriously are schools taking attendance? In the report that came out, it said there's no evidence to associate school lunches with improved, attendance. And then your friend Boyd Swinburne, I mean, he was all over TV1 last week saying how the data showed that attendance had improved, and get this, by an average of 3 days a year, so that's 0.075 days a week, for $324 million spending.
But this is bollocks, right? It sounds crude to say that, but it's bollocks. There were no school lunches when I went to school. You went to school or else.
Yep.
And, in secondary school, certainly, not so much in intermediate, but in secondary school, it was, well, there you go. There's a fridge full of food there. You need to make your lunch before you go to school, was what Mum would say.
Mm-hmm.
And she would supervise or oversee. She'd say, show me what you've taken to lunch for lunch.
Yep.
And And we did that. And then the other answer to that, of course, is, well, who fed the kids during COVID lockdowns?
Or school holidays, etc.
Who feeds the kids during school? Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So I have this strong belief that feeding your children is the responsibility of a parent. Now, I know there's a lot of parents that don't or won't or can't. Those are what we need to address. We need to address the don't, want, won't, and can't type parents to find out what's going on. And if it's a money issue, well, feeding them at school isn't going to solve it.
Oh, I think it has to be well researched. Who needs it? Okay, if they need it, we'll deliver it.
Yeah.
But we're also going to accompany that with a parenting program. And people go, oh, but you're exposing. Well, no, we're helping people because we're bringing those people into the school. We've got good people coming in. We're talking about budgeting. We're talking about the need to do this stuff. It's not inconsequential. And the other, I think it's most bizarre, is that let's say your school is in the school lunches program. Well, not only can you not send your lunch in with your child, they kind of get penalised if they come to school with it, and often they have to sit separately. And, our oldest kid particularly, I mean, all three kids were really active at school, but this kid never sat still. The morning tea, lunch, he'd get through his maths so he could go out shooting hoops and playing table tennis until I found out that was happening. And, he would have had 3 of these lunches. And so the fact that parents can't send lunch with their kids is bizarre. And so they're reviewing that. So that's kind of what I think the government's up to. Love to see more visible leadership. There's been almost no questions in the House around education. There was one last week when the ERO report came out on bad school behaviour. To me, that again, yes, schools have to be good and schools have to deal with what they've got and deal with it well, but it's parenting.
That's the problem, isn't it? Because I've got a good mate and his grandson was being bullied at school and, they'd drawn it to the attention of the school and it carried on. And finally decided to take matters into his own hands and gave the bully a good hiding. In the good old-fashioned way of dealing with bullies, right? You can't do that in the modern-day society. So what happens is the parents get called up to the school and said, your son's assaulted this child. And they said, well, actually, we drew your attention to this guy's bullying and it hadn't stopped, and so he sorted it out now. And they said, oh, well, the problem is the guy that he hit came back and said, it wasn't really fair and he wanted to have another go, and arranged it for after school, and your son gave him another hiding. But this time people videoed it and put it on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, and so they were in trouble because it was... Now, my mate said, well, let's have a look at this video, then said to his grandson, he said, mate, that's a sissy punch. Right? You need to... So what they've done is they've enrolled him in some martial arts training so that he can defend himself better. But the school suspended him for defending himself for 4 days.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to, teach him a lesson. Well, he came back to the school and he's a hero because he stood up to the bully, and now other people were standing up to the bully and the bullying problems ended because somebody stood up to the bully.
Absolutely.
But the schools punished him.
One of the best phone calls I ever got, I was teaching at St. Cuth's, and I got a phone call from the principal of Cornwall Park District School, where my 3 kids went, and it was a principal. And he said, I need to have a conversation about your boys, the fighting pool boys. And I said, the what? and he said, look, Michael, your older son, was in the playground and he tripped over this bigger boy, and the bigger boy was known for being a thumper. And so this bigger boy gets up and starts punching Michael. Now, Michael's brother, who was 7 at the time and weighed about 25 kilograms and had poor eyesight, I have no idea how he knew this was going on, comes tearing across the field, leaps on the bully's back and starts thumping him. Yeah. And, the principal wanted me to talk to the boys. So, when they came home, I said, look, guys, it's probably not a good habit to be into. But Daniel, it's incredible, that you went out and defended your brother, because that kid weighs at least 3 times what you weigh. And I'm really proud of what you did. As I said, I'm not going to encourage you to fight, but it was a moment. And his older brother paid him back years later. They were in a really competitive cycle race. And Daniel was young, and Michael was riding away with the leaders, and he looked around, and his little brother was trying to come across the gap, which was never going to happen. And so Michael dropped back, and you probably know the name Gordon McCauley. Him and another were in the lead group, and Michael dropped all the way back to Daniel, rode him back up the front, and said, "Never do that again." And I thought, that came from all of that time.
So, we're talking about poor behaviour in schools.
Yes.
We're seeing that manifest itself in society as well.
Yep.
We've had this clampdown by schools on so-called bullying. You've got people using social media, with impunity, saying the most awful, appalling things to kids and stuff like that. They then grow up to become adults, and you see them on Twitter, or X as it's called now, saying the most appalling things to people. And I sit there and I think to myself, you know what? This is like this because these people have never had a kick in the teeth from someone they've insulted. They've never learned the consequences of being mean as someone gives you a hiding.
I think as well. My big thing is at the moment parenting, and I have chosen not to take full-time work this year. I'm earning some money the other way, so people listening, just get on my Substack and subscribe, thanks. But we need to address parenting in New Zealand. The government cannot solve these problems, and schools cannot solve these problems.
No.
Schools have to be good. And
they can't suspend their way back to good behaviour. It doesn't work.
Well, you can, but you'll only have 15% of the school population left.
Yeah.
And I believe we need a crown entity of parenting. It needs to be incredibly well defined.
But you're doing something about that, aren't you? You're setting up a union of parents.
I'm working with some very good people to look at that because, even from an education perspective, there is no parent voice. What they call themselves the peak bodies, which, how does that work? So in Wellington, these peak bodies will meet with the minister, the ministry, PPTA, NZEI, the teacher unions, Principals Association for secondary and primary, school trustees. So
vested interests. But nobody vesting in the interests of the children or the parents.
Not at all. And then you go all the way back. So I call it Project 5.75. I've got some good people working on this kind of thing in New Zealand, like Nathan Wallace, who are saying, we need to invest money in the first 5.75 years of life. That includes pregnancy, because we've got these programs for kids in schools with fetal alcohol syndrome. It's a heck of a lot easier to stop than to treat. And
easy to prevent, isn't it?
And we a lot of us have become middle class to upper class, I guess, and we've had role models, and we know the things that we've talked about, like reading to your kids and stuff like that. The amount of words you speak to your kids. Can I swear on your program?
You just can't say the F word or the C word. The editors throw real wobbly.
Okay, so I was in a supermarket in Hamilton the other day. I'm not really a sweary person for the start, and there was a parent with a kid who wasn't misbehaving, He was 2 meters ahead of her and seated right beside her. She's, "Come back here, you little shit, I'm sick of your bad behaviour." And I thought, okay, if you do that in the supermarket, what's happening at home? And again, a lot of parents actually don't know the impact that that's having. And I'm trying to bring a guy called David Eagleman to New Zealand. He's I'd argue, the top communicative neuroscientist in the world. And he just talks so well into those developmental years about if you're not producing the brain and physical development that child needs, and that they're not going to catch up.
No.
And he uses the Ceausescu Romanian legacy of the hundreds of thousands of orphans, and the people going in there after sort of a period of time and saying, well, why aren't they crying? And the people in the hospital saying, well, they did, for 6 months or 2 months or whatever it was per child. And then they stopped because no one was meeting their needs. And so really good-hearted people came in and adopted a lot of these kids, but they actually had lifelong problems. And so if we're going to address what's happening now for our 14, 15, 16-year-olds, we actually have to do that, but we need to go back and say, hey, what do we want in 18 years' time?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Because, everybody's got a story about a dud teacher that they had. Very few people have a story about a fantastic teacher that challenged them. And we've got to turn that around. But I don't know how we turn that around, because my experience of teachers, we talked about that with your kids, asking them about, Auckland Grammar, how many teachers could they name? Well, I'm in the same boat. I can only name one teacher that made a difference to my life, but he made a difference to my life through sarcasm and trying to be demeaning, right? But I just rose above that. That's the only reason why he made a difference in my life, because I actually liked his sarcasm, and I thought, I can work with that.
There are some great teachers. I had one extremely influential, good one who I've stayed up with. Our second child, he was pretty naughty at school, primary school. And a lot of it came back to Karen and I hadn't realised that his sight was impaired. And it wasn't until we did that he got glasses that he, got. But one teacher said to us, year 5, I think he's amazing. And we said, are you serious? And we weren't trying to be mean. And then at the end of year 6, he came home and he said to us, I think I'm getting a prize. And we were like, okay, really? And we said, what prize do you think we're getting? He says, I think I'm getting best academic boy. Now, we've told him this story, so he's no longer embarrassed, but we shut ourselves in a room and just, I don't know, I suppose giggled nervously. And that's exactly what happened. And this one teacher had turned him around. And I think those stories are important, because teachers, it's an amazing job. I still regard myself as never having worked a day in my life. And I have worked alongside some incredible teachers. But then I've worked alongside, possibly the majority, not in the schools that I established because we had really good staff protocols, but teachers who complain about kids. Teachers who pigeonhole kids from day one, and all of those kinds of things.
It's a lasting impact on those children. You look at the stories I've told you. I told you a story about 2 teachers from secondary school. I'm 55 years old and I know their names. I know what they did. I know and the impact that it had on me.
Oh, you never forget.
No.
And again, that's these people. I mean, they spout that they are important. They are right. They are important, but they see that importance from the wrong perspective. They see it, I am important, therefore pay me more. Well, if you're a good teacher, you deserve to be paid more. No doubt. Absolutely.
No question.
Yep. But you've actually got to see yourself as being important, because whether you are good or not, that child is going to remember you.
They are. They can have an impact, negative or positive, on your life. And sadly, there's far too many teachers that have a negative impact on children's lives, which have lasting, long-term negative consequences, which we're starting to see in society, where we've got poorly behaved adults interacting with other citizens in a way that we don't like.
And the school
I put that back to their lack of education and lack of understanding from their teachers as well as their parents.
And the school structure is important. Teachers being literate is important. I remember interviewing a teacher, and I'm not going to remember the name of the book now, but I said, what do you read? Do you read consistently? And she said, the last book I read. Now, what's the one about bondage and discipline? People will know it. The Shades of Grey.
Shades of Grey, yeah.
Yeah, so she's sitting in my office and she said, well, this is the last book I've read. And I thought, well, that's excellent. Next.
Yeah, let me guess. You're the resident caner and strapper of the school. Well, I think we've just about used up all our time, Alwyn. So people can find your Substack if they just do a Google search for Alwyn Poole Substack. That will pick it up and get you there. Or you can use Education Plus Challenging Mediocrity.
Yep, and education innovative consultants. I mean, I said in one of your posts or a post you put up yesterday, a lot of people will contact me because they want better for their kids.
Yeah.
And they start the conversation with, hey, look, I know you're busy or you probably haven't got time for, this is what I live for. And if it's a one-off conversation and I can help, that's cool. If they want, to set up something else, some advocacy, some work with their schools. I mean, I've also set up Mount Hobson Academy online. I'm no longer involved, but that is rocketing. And there are some really good things about virtual classrooms now, and the quality of teaching and the communication and connectivity you have with kids all over New Zealand and some other places in the world. They get together. Pretty hard to punch someone in the head when you're online. There are other ways, but these teachers are so good. There's almost no downtime. And for kids, certainly who are remote, it's also an amazing opportunity because a lot of our area and remote schools are just not doing well. So, hey, thanks for your time.
No worries. And really appreciated you coming on the Crunch. And if you manage to get that guy coming down to visit New Zealand, we'll definitely get in touch and we'll have a chat with him as well.
People can look him up. David Eagleman, there's plenty on YouTube and stuff. He's stunning. And probably the last thing in terms of parenting, when we were parenting our kids, we had Ian Grant, as a New Zealand icon in terms of the good things that you could do with your kids and how to parent and things like that. I don't know if there's an individual like that in New Zealand now, but we need collectively to bring back that kind of an emphasis because the government and schools can't solve these issues.
That's what Ronald Reagan used to say, the 9 most dreaded words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Correct. The ministry have to be good. The minister has to be good. The schools have to be good. But they're only going to be a small part of the solution, and they need to let it go and get parents back involved in schools, back involved in parenting, and give them the credit that they deserve when they do well.
Alwyn Poole, thanks for coming on The Crunch.
Thanks, Cameron.
Alwyn raises some concerning statistics, and those statistics are leading to societal impact. If kids can't or won't behave at school or even attend, then they won't behave elsewhere. The government's made a good start, but there is much, much more to be done. Tell me your thoughts on what Alwyn Poole had to say about the state of our education system by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You've heard the words open, fair, both sides of the story. It's easy to say them, but practicing them often seems like a bridge too far. New Zealand, it's time for a reality check. Reality check. RCR, Reality Check Radio. Rational discussion, common sense, and open debate for real. With me, Paul Brennan. You just can't make this stuff up. You couldn't write the script. Veteran broadcaster Peter Williams.
Where is the evidence they actually make a difference? It turns out that was a very fair question to ask.
Taking on the mainstream, Chantel Baker.
Mainstream media, as usual, in their little perch.
The man who cares so much and whose background is for real, Rodney Hyde.
The doctors don't believe them. They can't get ACC. They can't work. They're told it's all in their head.
Along with a raft of contributors to inform, entertain, and bring the truth back to New Zealand media. It's time for a reality check, all right. RCR, Reality Check Radio at www.realitycheck.radio. We've arrived.
Our text machine is now live. Send us your thoughts by texting your message to 2057. That's 2057. So get in touch with us now.
Gary Moller is back. It's been 6 weeks since we last spoke, so it's time to check in at where I am at after using his super smoothie for 6 weeks. And plus we'll touch on what he thinks the next step should be. Gary's on the line now, so let's get chatting about my health. Welcome back to The Crunch, Gary Moller. You've got some exciting news, I hear, about your cycling prowess.
Well, I guess you could say so. And this is relevant because we're talking about me doing what you've been doing. I'm just a little bit ahead of you. That's all, Cameron.
Yeah.
So I'm now in the 70-year-olds, and I took on a record which I've been eyeing up, and that's for the Karapoti, which is New Zealand's longest running mountain bike race and one of the toughest, probably the toughest. And the 70-year-old's record was 3 hours and 40 minutes, and I wanted to reduce that. And I reduced it by 40 minutes.
Wow.
And in doing so, I became the first 70-year-old to break the magical 3-hour barrier for that particular race. If you break 3 hours, you basically become one of the legends. My personal best, by the way, for that distance, which holds the 60-year-old's record, was 2 hours and 45. And I'm fit enough today where I know if I have the right conditions, I can lower it even further. 2 hours 40 would be a time. And why am I able to do this? Well, it's because, Cameron, I've invested in my health and in particular my nutrition. And I've been working on the idea of staying 20 years ahead of disease. And by doing so, I'm certainly pushing back the barriers that are associated with aging.
Well, it's 6 weeks since we last spoke, and we'd talked about your, your lemon peel or citrus peel drink, and I'd done that for 6 weeks or so, and then we said, right, you said to me, right, you need to get on to the super smoothies. Now, that you're eating your own, I call it eating your own dog food, right? So you say to people, you need to do this, and then you go and do that. All right. So you're doing exactly what you're telling other people to do. And that's how you're getting these results. Now, I've been eating or drinking or whatever, consuming, how's that for a better word, your famous super smoothie for the last 6 weeks. Now, people who know me will be sitting here thinking, oh my God, Cam Slater's gone weird. He's now eating fruits and berries and smoothies and all of that sort of thing. But you know what? I feel $1 million since starting on that. I'm as full as a state school all the time. I don't have to have snacks all the time. Occasionally I'll have something just to do a little top up. But most of the time I'm having breakfast and then a smoothie for lunch. And then I might get to dinner and I really don't have any appetite. And what I might do is just have a second smoothie for dinner, or I might get a light meal or something like that around 6 o'clock. But I'm shedding weight, but it's kind of weird because I'm gaining muscle as well. And I can feel that I'm not doing a lot of exercise, but I can feel the changes that are in my body. So I want to explore the super smoothie for the listeners so that they can get onto the amazing benefits that I'm getting and clearly you're getting from these super smoothies.
Well, first of all, for the benefit of listeners, I haven't seen Cam for 6 weeks and I take little snapshots. So I've got a visual snapshot of what Cam looks like. We are doing a Zoom, so we are looking at each other. And Cam, if we go right back to when we first made contact late last year, the change in your appearance is quite remarkable. It is noticeable. You don't have the darkness under your eyes. It looks like you've thinned out, and that doesn't necessarily show as a weight loss because muscle is denser, or lean tissue is denser than fat. Fat's a little bit like foam rubber. You can get quite a volume for not much weight. That's why a person who has got plenty of fat will float well, whereas somebody who's pure muscle might tend to sink. So you can change your physical appearance to look leaner, but not necessarily lose much weight. And that's one of the really important things to just bear in mind. So Cam, you're looking healthier.
Well, I'll tell you the other
definitely
thing that
to
I've
me.
noticed, Gary, is that my beard, which was almost entirely grey before, has a lot of brown hair in it now. You'll notice.
Well, you've got a good beard. I could have a competition with you on growing beards, but I wouldn't win when it comes to the upper layers of hair, unfortunately. Yeah, there's a couple of things. There may be the whole pigment thing. Once those little genes have been switched, which says grey hair, unfortunately, it's likely to stay that way. But there's a couple of other things. The pigment, the quality of your hair overall, if we're doing our job right, will improve. The actual hair strands themselves should be thicker and stronger, which means that your hair will visibly look thicker and better and more bouncy. In your case, not my case. Yeah, so there'll be those improvements, and it'll also be reflected in your skin and nails.
Absolutely.
And look, if somebody's healthy, they look healthy, don't they? And that's because the skin is in better condition. So the outside, the outer looks is a good reflection of your inner health. And I think we can put a big thumbs up for you on that one, Cameron. You've been doing something right, well and truly.
Well, these super smoothies, I was skeptical at first. I've never had, wanted to get into smoothies or eating fruits and berries and things like that. I always took a manly sort of approach to being a meat eater and all of that sort of thing. But what I've found is a couple of neat little tricks. Fortunately, I never knew these things existed. It shows how sheltered a life I had. But at the supermarket, you can buy little bags of frozen strawberries or bags of frozen blueberries and strawberry and mixtures of berries. There's a whole lot of different ones as well. There's like melon pieces and things like that. And the other thing that I've found that I can get at the supermarket is like fingers of pineapple, which fit into my magic bullet quite nicely. And so I've been adding, fingers of pineapple into my smoothie as well as all the other ingredients in there. And also I chuck an egg in each one as well, a raw egg in the smoothie, and zoom it up. And it's the other thing I do is I've got the Sujon powder, the black currant powder, and I put a teaspoon of that into each smoothie. It doesn't matter what flavor it is. I just chuck a teaspoon of that in. So that's what I've been doing. And as I said, I feel $1 million. I've got heaps of energy. I'm sleeping really well, and I just feel a lot clearer in my head as well, and I feel a lot better in my body. So these things, when you say they're a super smoothie, I think they really are.
Oh, they definitely are super smoothies, and you've actually raised a number of issues. The first thing, Cam, when we did that hair tissue mineral analysis on you, overall, it showed us that you were running on empty.
Yeah.
Now, this is very common. I think it's a reflection on the overall nutrient depletion of our food, including organic food. It comes down to the quality of the soil. New Zealand soil has always been poor. It's always been lacking a number of key minerals. And while those have been corrected to some degree, we must remember that things have been corrected for agricultural production, whether that's animals or whether that's crops. And it's not necessarily adding the nutrients that you need specifically. And by doing that testing, we've been able to figure out as best we can what you, Cameron Slater, needs, not what Gary Moller needs.
Yep.
And the food that you've been eating, while it may have been the best organic food that you can get, it's not necessarily rich in the nutrients that you need. By resorting to or by using the super smoothie, what we are doing is we're doing some basics like the whey protein, which is referred to as the king of proteins. I guess it could be the queen as well, but it's the king of proteins. And then we tailor added ingredients to give more or less the nutrients that we think you need. So what we've been doing for Cam is that Cam has purchased a whole lot of ingredients which are designed to meet his particular needs, and also bearing in mind his rather dramatic health history as well, which you might want to remind listeners of, Cam. And then Cam is combining that with foods that are rich in essential fatty acids, the fat-soluble vitamins, and the berries were rich with the antioxidants and other wonderful things. You really do end up with a nutrient-packed super smoothie.
Well, I've also, one other thing I've added in there is chia seeds as well. I chuck in a couple of teaspoons of chia seeds into my super smoothie. But yeah, I mean, you've got me on, the basics that you list on the website. People can search. It's easy to find. Just search Gary's super smoothie or Gary Moller's super smoothie. You'll get the link straight away, and it tells you what you need to put in there.
And yes, for people, they can do some basics, and if they then do the testing, the head tissue mineral analysis testing, that can help them to refine things further and therefore get better results.
Now, there's some key basic ones that everybody probably needs to have, isn't there, in their super smoothie? Correct. So obviously the whey protein.
Yeah. Yes, I would say whey protein.
Yep.
And then collagen. And
that helps with the hair growth, doesn't it? Collagen helps with the hair growth and fingernails and things like that.
Well, let's go a little bit further. You can just use Google to do this for you. Just type into Google taurine and inflammation, taurine immune system, taurine osteoporosis, taurine arthritis, and so on. And do the same with collagen. Type in neuroinflammation. You can even dive even deeper, and you can type also N-acetylcysteine is another one which we should add on to that list as being
commonly known as
beneficial. NAC, not to be confused with an airline that used to exist. And type in all those key words. You can also type in words like cancer, like just type into Google whey protein and cancer survival. And what you will see is good evidence that cancer, which is a wasting disease, can be countered to some degree simply by giving somebody a whey protein smoothie. In other words, if you give somebody a whey protein smoothie, or if you had 100 people with cancer, give them a whey protein smoothie, they're more likely to survive, and so on. So if you go through and just do those key searches, another area worth typing is heart. Put in cardiomyopathy or heart failure or words like that. And that's very relevant in this COVID era, to be looking at things which, or substances, nutrients, which help protect the heart, the cardiovascular system. Also, of course, another key word area is stroke. And,
I know all about
and looking at that. Now, yes, so Cameron, you suffered a devastating stroke, which nobody would ever know. If we're looking at you today, we wouldn't believe it. But let's
that's the
talk
thing,
a little bit about...
the neurosurgeon told me I'd never use my right arm again, right? So
it's working.
I'm back shooting. I can beat most people that I'm in a competition with, and whatever discipline I choose, be it pistols or shotguns or whatever. There's very little impairment now in that right arm, and I've done the work for it though. I've spent 4 or 5 years at physiotherapy, but now I'm down to the small percentages that are left, and that's where I'm finding the addition of these things that you've suggested I put into my super smoothie are making small incremental gains. And the one that's the most interesting is the beta-alanine, because when you start drinking the smoothie, within about 5 minutes of drinking it, you get this tingling sensation that starts around the base of your skull and then moves out, radiates across your shoulders and then down your arms and down into your fingers and then down through your body and down to your toes. And it's like there's like little nanobots that are turning themselves on under the skin and giving you this tingling feeling. And it seems a little bit disconcerting at the time, but then you realize to yourself, well, actually that shows the nerve endings are starting to rebuild, and I'm starting to get those feelings back in my fingers. Like I can now wiggle my fingers like this. I can now start typing with my right hand. That's only happened in the last couple of months, that I can do those sorts of things. So I'm noticing all these changes, and some of the things that said before, would be particularly useful for people who are suffering arthritis, particularly women as well with osteoporosis. That's largely a women's disease in New Zealand or around the world. And if they start doing these super smoothies and get the things that are targeting those areas, then they'll see an improvement in their life. And then the more that you do, the more that you can do. And it just gets better and better and better from there. I'm leaping around I do about 5Ks walk every morning, and I'm doing it. I'm not running. I don't like running. I don't like the damage running does to your knees and things like that. But walking briskly, and I'm doing 5Ks in about 40 minutes, and on varying terrain as well. So on the beach, on footpaths, on grass and things, all those sorts of different things that give you these little micro improvements in your body because of the different angles and everything like that. But I couldn't do that if I didn't have the energy. But I wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm leaping out the apartment and down onto Takapuna Beach and round the block, and 5Ks is knocked out, pretty much before 7 o'clock.
Well, I think, again, for listeners, Cameron is a model patient or student. I would say his life has probably been dominated by obsessive behaviors, and he's certainly a battler, and he's taken these qualities and directed them in a very positive way, such that he's made the most amazing, remarkable recovery. I would put you right up there in the top 1% when it comes to stroke recovery.
Well, just to give you an example, you know a bit about these things. You've worked for ACC and things like that. The size of the damage in my brain was 2 centimeters across. 2 centimeters across in the front left of my brain. That's when you hold up fingers 2 centimeters apart. That's a big dead spot. For about 3 or 4 years, I could actually feel that dead spot in my brain. I could feel the deadness that was there. It was like a weight that I could feel. I don't have those feelings anymore in there. Maybe I've rewired my brain around it, and those dead ends no longer exist, or they've been absorbed, or whatever. The brain is an amazing thing, but you have to work it, and you have to work it regularly, repetitively, and monotonously sometimes to retrain yourself to do the things that you used to do or enjoy. But I maintain that anybody can recover.
Yeah, your brain's like any other organ or structure in your body. If you don't use it, you lose it. And if you want to make it stronger and more functional, you need to place it under a balance between stress and recovery. But that also includes supplying the building blocks for building a nice, healthy brain, for neurons, brain cells, and to be able to manufacture the neurotransmitters and so on.
Yeah.
Now, if listeners do some searches, for example, you can type into Google neuroregeneration and taurine, neuroregeneration and beta-alanine.
That's the one that makes you all tingly.
Yeah, your tingly stuff. And you can type in acetyl-L-carnitine or carnitine and neuroregeneration. So if you do that kind of search, you will see it'll be mind-blowing, exciting, thrilling when you see the role of those nutrients for basically building a healthy brain. And when somebody's suffered any kind of brain injury, whether it's stroke or falling off their bicycle and whacking their head or something like that, it's absolutely essential that we supply the building blocks that we know of that are necessary for neuroregeneration. But you can also do a similar search, as I've said before, neuroinflammation. And that's particularly, again, relevant in this COVID era when we're talking about inflammation driven by spike proteins. So if you're thinking of things like tinnitus, difficulty with tracking or focusing with the eyes, difficulties with balance, seasickness, and so on, which may be associated with the COVID vaccine. This is where these super smoothie ingredients become particularly important.
Yeah, that list of ingredients. Yeah, those list of ingredients you gave me, they all come. You get this box. For listeners, you get this big box arrives from Gary, and there's all these powders. Everything's powdered. There's no tablets in this, right? And why is that? Why is that, Gary? Why do you have all of these supplements in powdered form?
Well, to give you an idea, a set of tablets that might be equivalent might be $100. A New Zealand sourced powder might be $35. So it's a no-brainer from that point of view for saving you some dollars. The other thing is, hey, if you can put it into a delicious smoothie, why take pills?
Yeah, so you suggest when you get these to mix them all together. So, what I did is I went and got a plastic bucket because there's quite a lot of powder, right? I don't think there's any mixing bowls that are big enough. I've got a couple of really big ones, but that was overflowing, both of them. So it was a bucket for me. And I just tipped everything through a sieve. I actually bought 2 buckets, right? I tipped everything through a sieve first into the bucket. And then I put everything in that bucket back through the sieve into the second bucket, and then I put it into containers that I could put in the cupboard away from the sun and away from the light and all of that sort of thing, airtight containers. So it's a bit of fun. There's powder goes everywhere when you're mixing it all up. But then all you need to do is when you're making your smoothie, you put in your almond milk if you want to use that, or high protein milk. And then you just put in I put in 3 tablespoons into my smoothie each time. And because you've mixed it all into a bucket, it's all in the right proportions that Gary's recommended. And this is the important thing, right? First of all, you've got to contact Gary, and then you've got to get a hair test done, because then he knows what to say is needed for your particular nutrients. And then you can get all the things for the super smoothie. That's the right process, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the ideal. If somebody's in good health, not on medication, not struggling with chronic health issues, then they could bypass the testing side of things. But if they do have chronic health issues, then it's best that they get tested and take it from there. It's the process that we did with Cameron. Bearing in mind, Cameron, you had major health incident, and there was also the question, because of your shooting, that there may be lead and other contaminants in your body, which may have led to the stroke. Now, in that test, we didn't see anything. However, a number of things like the strange goings on with potassium and also some dodgy looking things going on with calcium and magnesium on the testing that we did.
Yep.
It doesn't eliminate completely the possibility of lead and other contaminants buried deep within your body. You see, when we do a hair tissue test, we're looking at what's coming out of your body.
Yeah.
Contaminants like lead are sequestered deep in the body in fat and in bone. It includes the brain. And if you are not actively excreting it because of a lack of the nutrient support and also perhaps the interfering effect of certain medications, which you are on, then we may not initially see the lead because it's buried, sequestered. Now, we are waiting for another test to come through. It's now time.
Yep.
And when we get the next test, the hair that has been growing, that Cam is clipping and going to be testing, may contain the residues of having mobilized and removed some of those contaminants. And so we may pick it up on the second test.
Yeah, well,
and
so I need to trim my beard again now.
Ooh, yes. Now, and by the way, your beard will be good for that because it is slow growing compared to the scalp hair.
Yeah.
So it's more likely to hold a record of a detoxification. So that's what we'd be looking for, Cameron.
Well, that's what we've been doing, isn't it? We did the citrus peel drink to detox, particularly the liver, but to detox the body. And then we moved on to the protein, still keeping some of those same ingredients that are in the lemon peel. I'm putting in the black currant powder and those sorts of things. I'm going to be really interested to see what the next.
I'd like to just add that black currant, the New Zealand black currant, and by the way, a heaped teaspoon of the freeze-dried powder, that's the Sujon one which you're using, which comes from Nelson. That is the equivalent to a full cup of fresh picked black currant berries. So it's a good dose that you're getting, and it is a source of quercetin. And again, listeners should type into Google quercetin and just health benefits, but also quercetin COVID-19, quercetin ionophore. It's a nutrient that helps the transfer of nutrients across the cell wall, the cell membrane, to help get nutrients into your cells, which is where it needs to be, and also to remove toxins out of the cells. Look it up and people will see why black currant is so valuable and why, well, in fact, all of those very dark berries have got major health benefits. Black currant is right there at the top, though. It's the best.
Yeah, and I'm putting that powder, the freeze-dried powder, into each super smoothie. But I'm also getting black currants and blueberries and things from the frozen berries that I'm putting in as well.
Yeah, go for it, Cameron.
Now,
just again, I think it is worth just reminding listeners, if they haven't heard, of the health benefits of citrus peel. It's not the citrus juice, it's the peel. The best thing to do is to just simply type into Google Gary Moller citrus peel recipe, and you'll find it there. Now, again, type into Google citrus peel and words like cardiovascular disease, arteriosclerosis, immune system. Type in citrus peel cancer, and you will see that researchers use words like compelling, potent. These are words that researchers normally never use. That's referring to a fruit that you should be able to find somewhere in your neighborhood, for next to nothing. It is such a potent nutrient, but it is the peel. And you can also type in things like cognitive function. You'll see that it does have preventive effects against Alzheimer's dementia. Think of neuroinflammation. Again, all of the things that, by the way, are beneficial for Cameron Slater.
Yep.
Totally. So you've done, and of course, type in detoxification. Also, citrus peel is an anti-parasitic. If you've got parasites in your gut in particular, then having a bolus of citrus peel making its way through your gut helps to basically hoover out any bugs that shouldn't be there, like worms. It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. It's amazing the difference it makes. When the first couple of weeks I was taking, the citrus peel drink, I'd make a big jug of it up.
Yeah.
I had it literally cleans you out. It really does.
Well,
not in an explosive way, but certainly that things are working properly.
Cameron, it's always better to be a little bit on the loose side than to be constipated from a health point of view.
Yeah.
The other thing, I mentioned cardiovascular health. I refer to citrus peel, the oils, the bioflavonoids that are found in citrus. I refer to it as Mr. Muscle Drano for your arteries.
Yeah.
And again, look it up. Look at the research into conditions like atherosclerosis and arteriosclerosis and the use of citrus peel, and it will blow you away. Now, we started this discussion by talking about the performance that I did at this race and other races. It's now been very consistent. And to do that, I've got to have a strong heart. I've got to have good circulation. And of course, the other thing is not only is circulation important for your heart and your muscles to be able to run and ride and to be able to do a hard day's work, but also for your brain to work well. Your brain is only as good as the blood flow. And that's why the citrus peel recipe has been so important for you, Cameron.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Why it's so important for the rest of us.
Yeah, my mates, we catch up for lunch every Monday. We've been doing it for about 25 years. And, the last time we had a discussion, then some of them had heard it. And Paul, who's one of my buddies on the show, he got me to make up, quite a lot for everybody at the group to get everybody to have a drink of this, see how you go. Well, I had a few phone calls after that saying, wow, I couldn't believe what happened, and then they're saying, where do you get this? Where do you get the recipe? So I've been sending the links out and everything for that. So, I make up a jug every now and then, not as often as I was, because I'm getting some of those things with the super smoothie as well.
Yes.
But I'm just feeling $1 million. The other thing that I add into my super smoothie as well is pine pollen. Now people might think, why the hell is he adding pine pollen in there? Well, it's a little bit expensive, but half a teaspoon in each smoothie is adding things. The pine pollen has all sorts of things that increase your energy levels, your immune function. The other thing that the pine pollen powder does, which is very important if you're a bloke about my age, when you kind of turn from your 40s onwards, blokes' testosterone levels plummet alarmingly. And if you don't do anything about it, well, it doesn't really help you with your libido and those sorts of things and your hormonal balance. So boosting that up is going to make you feel better, a whole lot better. But also testosterone is important for women as well. It helps protect against the osteoporosis, just the same as some of the other things. So that's the other thing that I add in. It's tasteless. It doesn't add anything other than nutrients, and I'm really enjoying the benefits of it.
Well, one of the just a couple of other reasons for why a smoothie is good. Some people just simply have trouble swallowing big tablets.
Yeah,
and when you mix up a smoothie, it goes down very easily, and if it's done right, it's delicious. The other thing, of course, is that you can be absolutely creative with what you put in, just like what Cameron's just said.
Or how you use it as well. Because what I've been doing, Gary, is I'll have a bowl of muesli and I'll pour my smoothie over the top of it.
Yeah, perfect. And just one other thing that people can add, which will add very much to the potency, is turmeric. Again, thinking about a month's supply, like a kilogram is about a month to 6 weeks worth, and a pot of this is a month, and so on, or a third of a pot, depending upon what we've decided on.
Yeah.
But you can get one of those packets of powdered turmeric. I think it's Greg's, just a little those little tiny packets, and that's about a month's worth. So when you're mixing up your whey protein smoothie powder, just empty 1 packet of turmeric powder. Now, when you look at these,
it's about $3 at Woolworths. You can get the Mrs. Rogers Eco Pack, cheap. Right? Which is ground organic turmeric, $3. Yeah. Chuck that in, you won't notice it.
And now here's the other thing. You might, when you're looking at these things, you might say, oh, there's not really enough vitamin C. There's not enough turmeric. There's not enough of this and that. Think of food when it's properly constituted. All of those nutrients work as a team. And it's a synergy. So 2 + 2 = 6. So when you combine all of these together, they work as a team, which means you don't need as much, or a month's worth will then go for 6 or 7 weeks. And it's a team, it's a synergy. And that's the way Mother Nature intended food to be. You don't just have magnesium on its own. Magnesium and calcium go together, but they go together with the B vitamins, which go together with the fat-soluble vitamins, which go together with the essential fatty acids. It's best to combine the whole lot into a synergistic mix. And that's how that's why we call it a super smoothie. Just one other thing, Cam.
Yeah.
I use the citrus drink, or I use it as the base for the hydration when I'm out training and competing hard.
Yeah, it's great.
And what I might add a little bit of extra of, if it's actually a race, is I will add some extra sugar in the form of some fruit juice. But other than that, the water which I'm using in my smoothie is the lemon water with some extra black currant. The black currant has got a little bit of sugar in it, but here's what you and your friends will notice. When you have this kind of drink, the energizing effect, especially if you've got a bit of NAC thrown in as well, the energizing effect will be within about half an hour.
Yeah.
It's almost immediate. And so you get the immediate energy boost, but then there's the long-term effects, which for me has been over a 20-year period. So every year I keep thinking, I've peaked. And then the next year comes and I look back and I say, I've gained a bit more, and I've gained a bit more. I'm now 70 and I've been doing this since I was 50. I was thinking, I've peaked. But every year I increment another tiny little bit. And when we are around these sorts of ages, the normal course of events is that we get slower.
Yeah.
We get more tired. It's called aging. So if we're feeling better each year, if we're going a little bit faster, if we feel a bit stronger and leaner, if our brain's working better, if our libido is cranking along happily, then it's kind of healthy aging, isn't it? I don't use the word anti-aging because I think that's the wrong term.
I don't know.
It's
You look
healthy aging.
You don't look your age, Gary. I've got to say, you look a whole lot younger than you actually are.
Well, thank you. It's been an investment, and it's been. I'll tell you what, it's been worth it.
You're still breaking records.
Well, I'm setting career best records. I've been a runner all my life. The running's been parked a little bit for a while, but cycling, I've been riding competitively since 1977.
Yeah.
And I'm setting personal records. So,
I mean, if you can shave 40 minutes off a record, that was set. God knows how many years ago that was set. But 40 minutes is a massive. It's not shaving. That's not shaving off a record. That's destroying a record.
Well,
and
on
setting
a
completely
bicycle, on a bicycle, it means that I would have been about 8 kilometers ahead of the previous fastest 70-year-old. So I think I can be pretty proud of that. Yeah, that's not bad.
How did the 60-year-olds go in that same race, Gary?
Well, I managed to beat them all, and and there were some 60-year-olds who, in the last 20, I've been trying for 20 years to beat 3 or 4 of them, and I did get my nose in front of all of them in that race. So I'm pretty happy about that. It shows, again, the importance of investing in the basics of health. The foundation of health, by the way, is not how hard you train or how good your genes were or anything like that. It first of all comes down to the investment in nutrition. You've got to be able to bake a cake, you've got to have the right ingredients, high quality, and in the right proportions, and then put together in the right order. And your body is exactly the same. You get that right, and then your genes, your innate talent, and all of that can express itself.
Yeah. So we're coming up against time here, Gary, but what are the next steps for me? You want me to trim off some beard here and send that to you? We'll get another test done and carry on with the smoothies, but with some little tweaks that, I've probably got about another couple of weeks worth of powders left, so I'm going to have to order some more. But interesting that you use the citrus drink as the base for the smoothie. I might do that, and then I'm killing 2 birds with one stone.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, be creative, Cam. Stick to the basics, but be creative. Now it is kind of stock take year, isn't it? Stock take time of the year. Yep. So let's do a nutritional stock take for you, Cameron.
Yep.
And until we get the test results, I would say more of the same. Just plug away. And then when we get the test results, we will, I'm curious, for example, whether or not we see any changes in things like lead, cadmium.
Yeah, I'm real interested in that.
What happens with potassium, your calcium and magnesium. And the other thing is we saw very low levels of things like iron. And so we need to get that, do another stock take, nutritional stock take, and then we take it from there. We will then make the appropriate adjustments.
Yeah, I need to go and visit the Westmere Butchery and get some more black pudding.
Yeah, you're a black pudding fan, and
lots of blood in that.
Well, it's interesting that when we did the hair tissue test, it's kind of said in code.
I wasn't eating enough black pudding.
Yeah, black pudding and eggs and mushrooms, bacon, and of course liver.
All the good things.
Yeah,
everything's better with bacon.
Yes, free range bacon ideally.
Oh yes, that's usually what I get. Free range bacon. It was running around, prior to it ending up in my freezer.
Well, look, I must say, Cam, you look incredibly healthy compared to where you were.
I'm getting comments all the time from people.
Yeah,
my mates, and they're coming up to saying, "Wow, Cam, what have you been doing? Your skin looks really good. Your hair's looking really good. You're looking really fit and healthy." I said, I always say to them, "Oh, well, that's what happens when you've
don't let it go to your head, Cam." But I think you can be pretty proud of your achievements. I'm very, I'm chuffed. I think you've done well.
Well, we'll just keep on doing that, and we'll see what other improvements I get. Because there's always little improvements, and I'm always focusing. You made a comment earlier on. You said I've probably been a bit obsessive about things, and well, that's exactly right. When I was pistol shooting, I was in the top 5 in the country. Most of my sports are individual type sports where I'm trying to beat myself because I can beat everybody else. So I've only got to compete with myself now. And that's what it's like with shooting. Everybody can get there or thereabouts. But when you're competing, you often have to compete with yourself because there isn't anyone around to compete with that, at practice or whatever.
Yeah, maybe, Cameron, we should replace obsessive with more positive terminology. And that, yes, you're focused, which is a good shooting term. And it's about wanting to be the best one can be. It's about better never stops. It's an ongoing, never-ending process. And those are the positive qualities. The thing is, Cam, I think another way of thinking of it is that you're somebody who gets things done.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it might be obsessive. I think it's the wrong term. I think it's just that you're somebody who likes to see a good job well done.
I'm target focused.
Yes, of course.
So I set my own targets and then I achieve them. They told me I'd never use my arm again. I said to the neurosurgeon, he's wrong. Proved him wrong. Went back and told him he was wrong. Sadly, I don't think he listened. But that's what people do. They don't like being proved wrong by people like me.
Well, I'm sure. You like proving people wrong. There's no doubt about that, and you have. And I always see it. It's sort of like an engineer. I've got a couple of engineers, and my brother and a sister, and my sister said to me, when somebody says to an engineer it can't be done, the engineer might sort of like nod and agree, but in the back of their mind, they're already planning their solutions.
Yeah. When somebody says that it can't be done, they're actually betraying that they can't do it, or they don't think they can do it. And you get people who look at things from a different perspective, and it can be done, but you've got to do maybe these 3 steps to get to that point.
Bring in the engineer.
Yeah. Well, Gary, it's been a real pleasure again this week. We're just up against time now, but we'll touch base again probably in another 6 weeks. I'll get a hair test organised with you, and then we'll just keep in touch, and we'll bring listeners up to date on the changes. I'm due to have some tests done at the doctors as well, so I'm going to see what the potassium levels are like in the next week or so. And fingers crossed we're getting everything in alignment and moving forwards rather than being stagnated and just waiting for things to happen. So it's been a real pleasure again talking to you about that, and hopefully our listeners have found this useful.
Thank you.
Gosh, every time I speak with Gary Moller, I find out something new. I'll be implementing these next steps, and we'll check in again with him in 6 weeks to see how or more particularly, how I'm going. What do you think about what Gary Moller has to say about super smoothies and a healthy approach to life? Let me know your thoughts by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Now it's time for Cam's Buddies. This week, we'll find out what they think about the special rooms at Auckland University that seem to be based on race. My producer has them all lined up and ready to go. Let's go now to Cam's Buddies. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Lindley.
Hello, Cam. Are you refreshed and raring to go?
Of course, I had a very pleasant Easter. I went to Waiheke for the weekend and had a wonderful time over there. Swimming, even, the media and the various weather forecasters told us it was going to be freezing cold and there'd be rain, and I was swimming every day at Only Beach.
Well, that might be the next theme, mightn't it? Global freezing.
Global freezing, yeah. Hey, this week's topic, I thought we'd touch on a bit of a kerfuffle at Auckland University. Have put some signs up and said these areas are for Maori and Pacifica students only. And I want to know what you think about that.
Well, I don't think very much of it, to be honest. And maybe we'd better warn listeners that they might need to hang on to their knickers, from my opinion. Now, the spaces concerned were Maori and Pacifica, but also Rainbow and Women. That's these spaces. Now, I just want to tell Willie Jackson, woman is pronounced woman for singular and women for plural. Just saying.
No, that's absolutely correct. And it used to grind my mother's gears, that's for sure. She used to sit there and shout at the TV going, it's women, it's women.
It really annoys me because you don't know whether you're talking about one or many until several sentences later. You can work it out, It's a bit like a quiz. Anyway, he should know better. Anyway, the kerfuffle is said to be around Winston, who says it's these seeds of racial segregation that led to the KKK and apartheid way of thinking where we're divided by race. This space does exactly that, in my opinion. It's labelled as such by signage. It indicates that the likes of myself couldn't go in there.
Well, what would be
David
funny?
Seymour,
Sorry, carry on. Yep,
sorry,
David
it's
Seymour.
all right. David Seymour campaigned against racial division, and he's simply standing by that, and I think that's good. There's no surprises there for people. Christopher Luxon's on the same page, and I think that's great to see the coalition actually standing united. I mean, something has to be united, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely, but it's like these government organisations and universities haven't actually got the memo that we voted against this sort of nonsense when we voted at the last election. And I've always thought it might be a bit funny if I put on, say, a hidden camera and then tried to go into these spaces for Maori and Pacifica. And someone might say, well, what are you doing in here? And I'll say, well, I'm Fijian. I was born in Fiji. It's Pacifica. What are you going to do about it? And then we'll find what the real situation is you're not brown enough or something like that.
Well, of course, they wouldn't be able to do a thing, in fact. And, of course, ultimately it'll end up that most people will be like that. You won't be able to recognise whether they're Maori or Pacifica or European.
Yeah.
So I don't know where this ends, but this ideology nonsense, it has no end. It just morphs on and on and on to the ridiculous, and I think it's got to that point now. Now, a law student said from Auckland University that these spaces, quote, are vital for well-being and to counter the discrimination that they face daily.
That's
and
bollocks.
it was also said it was also said there's lots of important information in these safe spaces, amongst other things, free condoms, sanitary products. Now, Cam, are these for men or women? I'm just a little bit confused. And also they have networks in there for harassment and anti-bullying. Now, this takes me a touch away from the racist angle of the topic, but it's my main point. Every bully has to find a victim, and the mentality of needing safe spaces in the first place creates victims. Bullies will then rule. As far as I'm concerned, they should barricade all safe spaces, put handrails in the corridors so these sad souls can learn to show some guts and hold themselves upright to face the world. And Parliament, if it's got the same safe spaces, it needs to do the same. I think it's really damaging to people to let them think they are a victim and never let them learn to stand up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it, Lindley? It's so condescending and patronising for the university, indeed government organisations, to say Maori and Pacifica are too stupid to attend university like everybody else. So what we're going to do is we're going to let them in, and now we're also going to provide them with some safe spaces so they can study quietly or whatever, because they're special. They're the special kids of the university. And I think it's patronising to treat everybody like that. And I think it's condescending to think that Pacifica and Maori students who get there on merit are not as capable as everybody else, and so they need a crutch or a support to be able to participate in university.
That is correct, and I think the only special thing that they create is it makes them special victims. And New Zealand is absolutely awash with it now. I mean, I come from a time when, we lived the opposite, and I must say I was never bullied at school. I was teased for being tall and thin, or what they thought was thin. 60 kilos is not really thin. But, I learnt to stand up, and nobody ever bullied me. And
no.
I think they knew they'd get a thick ear if they did. So I never had to do anything because I never got bullied. But if you teach people they're a victim, they will cower, and the bullies will just gravitate to them straight away. That's my opinion.
Well, when I was brought up, I was taught that bullies just need a smack in the head. And the best way to sort out a bully is to give them the bash. And somehow, somewhere along the line, we've decided that, we've just got to placate the bullies. And that's never worked. It never worked for Neville Chamberlain when he went up against Adolf Hitler. He said peace in our time and all that sort of nonsense because they never stood up to the bully. And it was only once the war started that the bully was smacked around. And that's what it is in school. It's the same thing with all of these people on social media saying mean things to people. It's like they've never been punched in the face. If they had been, they might have stopped doing those sorts of things.
Yeah, they probably haven't been punched in the face. But to be fair, I've never been punched in the face either, because I think there's something in your, I don't know whether it's your aura or what it is, but people know if you're a victim. People know if you're going to stand up for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They can see it. They can see the weakness, and then they focus in on that weakness, because reality is, as human beings, are just animals, right? And we know that in the animal kingdom, the weak are the ones that are culled from the herd by the strong, dependable lions or tigers or whatever predator animal is out there. Well, criminals and bullies are predators, and so they look for weakness. They never bully someone who's strong. They never bully someone who's self-confident, because they know that they're going to get nowhere and it's not fun. They only pick on the weak.
That's absolutely right. And that guy that's got into all sorts of trouble now, the Lion Man, I actually went along to his demo here in Christchurch, and he was fantastic to listen to. And he said that lions in the wild, they just sit down and watch the wildebeest go by. and they can sense the weak ones, and then they go after them.
Yeah, it's shopping.
So, that's survival for them.
That's
but,
right.
With human bullies, it's just sort of tapping into a sort of a need to be sadistic and horrible, which is also a trait that humans have, unfortunately, and some of them have got it more than others. But moving on to the actual education side of all this, I did watch Erica Stanford, and I thought she spoke actually very well. She pointed out that 80% of Maori students were not up to curriculum by intermediate level. Now, in my language, that means they were a failure. But, you're not supposed to say that these days.
No, everyone gets an award
and she
now.
wanted, everyone gets one. She wanted to address that issue first. And I say full marks to her, because that is what has to be addressed. And she said that she doubted whether they'd get enough Maori students at Auckland University to actually sit on the chairs in that safe space, because the situation was so dire. And I think she's got a really good point. Now, little test for you, if you're up for it.
Yeah.
Because this is one of my favourites. A recent survey questionnaire of maths teachers drew a perplexing result. One question asked, if you had 7 flies, which they had drawn on the paper, so it was if you had 7 flies, Cam, how many flies would you need to total 10 flies?
So let me get this straight. We've got 7 flies.
If you had...
We've already got 7 flies, and we need to get to 10 flies, right?
Yes. So how many more do you need?
Oh, hang on, I'll just count my fingers. 1, 2.
You can count your fingers.
3. I think
you'll be right.
I think we need 3 flies.
Yeah. And you're sure on that one? It's a really hard question.
Yeah, I'm sure. 3.
You're sure?
Yeah.
Well, many teachers could not answer this question, and when they were asked about it later on, they said that they were too scared to try because they might be wrong. It might have been a trick.
How can that be a trick?
This is true. And I heard that it was probably early last year. I was absolutely fascinated with it. I've tried it on so many people, and you are only the second person that's actually given the right answer.
Well, you'd have to be an absolute dolt to not get that correct. And if a teacher can't get that correct because they think they might fail, then they really shouldn't be teaching. They shouldn't be teaching our kids. They shouldn't have a failure mentality with our kids. We should be teaching our kids that they're the best that they can be, that no one can take that away from them. They are the absolute best at what they are. And if you empower people, they become powerful. If you belittle people and treat them like a lot of teachers treat kids, which is what I was talking to Alwyn Poole about, then they'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And sadly, what Erica Stanford is trying to achieve won't be achieved for at least a generation. But in that time, we'll have had a couple of Labor governments again, and they would have been pandering to the weak unions and the teacher unions, where they don't actually respect the kids that they're teaching.
That's absolutely right. And, years ago I saw a very controversial thing on TV. It was shown really late at night because it was so, terrifying to watch. And it was called The Hothouse People.
Yep.
And it was about this guy who educated kids, and he took a class of absolute dumbos way down, in their score, and he took them, I think it was in 6 weeks, he took them right up to well above average, just by getting them to sort of open up, stick their hands up and participate in the class, know that they weren't dumb. And that was really it in a nutshell. And he was so brilliant, and everyone went mad about this program. They said it was absolutely disgraceful. Those kids would have no friends because they would be ahead of their time with their education, so they'd have no friends. And they interviewed one kid who, as a 9-year-old, had actually qualified for university with this system. And he said, well, actually, I've got more friends than all the others because I've got friends at university and friends in the playground.
Exactly.
But, that mentality of having people kept down low, victims and all the rest of it, I think it's an absolute disgrace. And that's what I think of your actual topic. And I think it's time that students and teachers learn to have the guts to stand up and to try and to face the world, not to hide in safe spaces.
No, exactly. Anyway, I've got to take the next call now, Lindley, so thanks very much for calling in, and we'll talk again next week.
Okay, Cam.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Paul. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Cam. How are you this day?
I'm fantastic. I had a good weekend. I hope you had one too.
Yes, back in the weekend, I had a great time down at the beach with the family, and it was just nice.
Yeah, it was funny, because the weather forecast and the weather forecasters in the media were telling us it was going to be raining and freezing, but I was swimming, and it was delightful.
Well, I know Friday was a little bit inclement. I saw a front come through there, being an aviator, but Saturday, Sunday, Monday were beautiful days, and I was flying on two of them.
Well, you never get disappointed flying on beautiful days like those days, that's for sure.
No, the view was good. It was just absolutely lovely, and on a couple of them, there wasn't a cloud in the sky that I could see. So that's not bad for pretty good weather.
Yeah, pretty good. Now, this week's topic, we've had a bit of a kerfuffle with Auckland University being busted having safe spaces for people of a particular race or where they come from. Sometimes there's also women's spaces, but the most of the fuss was about the safe spaces for Maori and Pacifica students. What are your thoughts on that?
I seem to agree with some of the black movie stars when they say, why don't we call each other people rather than black people or white people? Why aren't we just people? Or why aren't we Kiwis rather than Maoris? Why aren't we New Zealanders rather than white or colour? If we're just people, then if you stop mentioning colour, it stops being a problem. And my thoughts are that safe spaces in place, who are they safe from? And why do they need to be safe from people who look like, there's not much aggression being shown, in my understanding. When I was at university, there wasn't much aggression being shown by one group of people to another. They were more trying to get on with the study that was required. Now I see that the teaching faculty have gone out of their way to let everybody know that you have to be a bit inclusive and a bit this and a bit that, which I think that's fueling the, leave people to their own devices. And most people are reasonable and kind. And if they're not, evict them, expel them, whatever you need to do, and just have reasonable people there rather than having all these safe spaces that are safe from whom.
Well, I noticed they also said they've got Muslim prayer rooms. Now, I'm wondering if perhaps a Jewish student asked for a prayer room, how you would get on at the university, or even indeed people like us who are Christian. If we said we wanted to have a prayer room at the university, I'm just wondering whether or not that would be provided for us, or are we the wrong kind of people to give these spaces to?
Yeah, I think we would be the wrong kind of people to give these spaces to, which is interesting in its own right, because the only people you're allowed to openly mock are white males. But if you look at white males, they're the only net contributors to the taxation system. Mm. So if you get all the women, add them all up in total, they are net recipients. If you get all different races and add them up, now, just having said that, I have to exclude Asians and Jews because they're not really interested in the welfare system at all. But many other people are net recipients. Like the Polynesians are net recipients. The Maoris are net recipients. So what they're saying is the only people you can mock is white males. Asians who work hard and have been bombed out of existence with nuclear bombs, but they've come back without a care in the world and just hard work and got there. And the main thing that I think is the cause of all the problems we have is absent fathers. And if we start addressing the real problem, which is absent fathers, then we will need a whole lot less safe places for people who are feeling somehow got at.
I was talking earlier to Alwyn Poole, and he was talking about poor behaviour at school. And I recounted, your situation with your grandson, how he was treated as the person who needed to be punished by the school, even though he was the victim of a bully.
Yeah, he was treated as a perpetrator because he managed to fight back, and when someone was pushing and shoving and hitting him, and he fought back, suddenly no fighting was their policy, so they wanted you to lay down and just take it. Well, of course, no one does that. It's just not how it works. But also, the reason we've got poor behaviour at school, again, goes to absent fathers, one. But when you look at how many kids don't attend school, so if you've got a school of 300, and you've got, that's your roll, say, or 500, whatever, and they're saying more than 50% aren't attending. So the government's paying money for half the students to attend or less. Now, on an everyday basis, what are those idle hands doing? And hence, when they come to school, they've got behavioural issues. Now, I'm on the board of a school that's when they had a decile, it was a decile 1 school. I think we've got 2 or 3 Europeans there, the rest are Pacifica, Maori and Asian. And I'm on the board of that school. And we've got an attendance of 80%. And I'm appalled at the 20% that don't go, meaning because we've got 350 kids odd, so we've got 70 kids away every day. And I'm saying it's terrible. We need to go and ring their parents, and our teachers ring every parent of every absent student. But we're like a country leader in attendance. And blow me down, 80% of the kids get qualified with university entrance and the like. And the main thing that they do differently to many other places is they come to school. And you're just thinking, who would have thought that would be the strategy that would actually beat all?
Well, I mean, that's the thing, and why I brought it up about bullying and the way that schools treat it. It's kind of carried on into university with this creation of safe spaces. Now, Lindley, who was just on before you, said that she views these safe spaces as a form of bullying, that it's saying that these people are victims and therefore they need to be protected from everybody else. But the system actually creates a situation where a victimhood is perpetrated on them, and they become perpetual victims because everyone keeps telling them they need safe spaces and they need special access to universities and they need special this and special that. And all of a sudden you're starting to think that maybe these people are the special kids, when in actual fact you've identified what it is that they just need to go to school. And then they'll find university a whole lot easier.
Well, they do. And also, what a condescending thing to say to people. You're so weak and dim-witted. We have to make a safe place for you away from others who may be unkind. Well, the School of Hard Knocks teaches you a lot. And if you learn to smile and laugh, the world smiles with you and you're having a great time. If you've got a frown and you're forever moaning and everything's wrong with everything, and it looks like many of our universities are breeding young people who are just objectionable because they are objecting to everything, and then that sort of perpetuates them to being less than what you want the people to be filled with. And also, I mean, I don't know if you've watched any of this, Jail, interviewing university students and asking them questions. Do you want a 4th grader, a 6th grader, or an 8th grade question? And things like, when did World War II finish? Getting stupid answers. Another one might have been, how long have who was the first president, say? And they come up with names of people that you've heard recently that have been in power. And you look and you think, didn't you learn the story about the cutting down the apple tree and he didn't tell a lie and all that? You just look and you think, I really worry for our future, because these people that go to university, in my view, don't seem sharp.
Well, I agree with you there. They don't seem sharp. It also seems the Auckland University doesn't seem sharp, and I'm thinking that they really don't have a history department. Otherwise, they would know what the slippery slope is and where it ends.
Exactly.
It doesn't end well. When you've got
many of these things, yes, we can ask the Jews how it went for them. We can ask a whole lot of people how it's gone for them when they've been special, then suddenly it doesn't work. And we seem to hide behind the things that we can't say. So we can't say that blacks owned a lot of slaves. The only people that are responsible for reparation are white people that have had slaves. Or we can't say that the Turkish Empire had more slaves than America. Can't say that. You can't say that an Irish slave was worth less than the black slave, so they had to be in the hold of the ship where they were chucking bales down to them, because if you crushed an Irishman, it was worth less than half of if you crushed a black slave. Now, these are the sorts of things that we don't hear, we can't say. And you just look and you think, well, in colonisation in New Zealand, the average age of the colonised has doubled. Can't be that bad a thing.
It's like, I'm always reminded every time Rawiri Waititi or some other moaning person complains about colonisation, I'm always reminded, of 30 years ago, The Life of Brian, when they're sitting there saying, well, what have the Romans ever done for us? And then somebody pipes up and says, well, there's the roads. Well, apart from the roads, what have the Romans ever done for us? And it goes on. And, you could do the same for New Zealand. What have the English ever done for us? Well, there's laws, there's roads, there's hospitals, there's sanitation, there's, floors,
plumbing and drainage,
houses, all of these things. But no, colonisation was a terrible thing and should never have been visited upon anybody on earth. Well, they've clearly, again, people aren't, looking at history. They're only looking back to, say, the 1700s or the 1800s, and they forget that the Romans colonised most of Europe and a fair chunk of Asia Minor and the northern part of Africa and Egypt, all the way through. And before the Romans, it was Alexander the Great who was colonising everybody. So, colonisation's been around forever. It isn't a modern thing that we need to be apologising for. I mean, no one expects the Italians to apologise for the Roman invasion of Britain, do they?
No, exactly.
Or the Viking invasion of Britain.
Yeah, so all these things seem to happen. So for my vote, safe places in a university for Pacifica and Maori is a huge, condescending, you're not real people and you've got to be protected from the terrible people who... I haven't met too many of them. The terrible people just seem like my neighbours.
Exactly. All right, Paul, thank you very much for your call, and we'll talk again next week.
Okay, take care. Bye for now.
Thank you. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Jack. Good to have you back.
G'day, Cam.
I hear you had a bit of a coffee session on the weekend at the beach.
Yeah, I made a few, as usual.
Well, you do make pretty good coffees. I'm not a coffee drinker myself, but if I was going to get someone to make me a coffee, it'd be you.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
Anyway, the topic this week is Auckland University and their safe spaces for Maori and Pacifica and, whatever else, women's spaces, rainbow spaces, special spaces, whatever. What do you think about this, Jack?
What do you think I should say? I was listening to our mealy-mouthed wonder boy Prime Minister on Hoskins this morning.
Mm.
When he was asked the question, what do you think about it? Oh, well, no, I don't like it. Well, what are you going to do about it? Oh, well, I'm not going to do anything. And then Hoskins says, well, but hang on, doesn't Auckland University's funding come from the government? Oh, yes, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to direct them. And I thought, we're doomed. We are really doomed.
It seems a rather simple solution, isn't it? I mean, I've joked, for the past week, saying that I was going to wear a hidden camera and try and go into the safe spaces for Maori and Pacifica and watch the outcry as they point out that you can't be in here. And then I'll have to point out to them that I was born in Fiji and then therefore technically I'm Pacifica. So let me in. And then they're nowhere to hear what the real truth is that I'm not brown enough.
Yes, exactly.
And where that goes is nowhere good. The logical conclusion of all of this feather bedding of people and telling them that they're weak and pathetic and they need safe spaces and we need to protect them from imaginary things that are besetting them in life, is that they become weak and pathetic and cry about everything that comes across their path that they think might be slightly upsetting them.
Yeah, I guess you're right. This
Come on,
country's
you can
going
do
to
better
the
than
dogs.
that.
I know. It's really like the education system and how poorly behaved they are. A simple solution, just take the benefit off the parents. Be fixed overnight. But of course, no one will do that.
Oh, no, it'd be depriving people. You can't deprive them of their entitlements. You'd hear all sorts of wailing and gnashing of teeth if you tried to do that. But, that's exactly what Paul was saying just before you. He was saying that a lot of the problems start at school with absenteeism, and they don't learn how to be contributing members of society by just bunking off school, and he puts that down to a lack of fathers in the homes. Now, it might be a little bit simplistic, but I think he's probably right.
And what fathers are in the homes, often they're drunk or drugged or both.
Deadbeat dads. And there's plenty of deadbeat mothers as well. And, I don't know if the government can actually solve this problem because it's intergenerational. And so if you put in place a policy or something to try and address this, you have an election in 3 years' time, you get tipped out, and you get some bunch of wombles or woke people like the Greens who think, all people need is a hug. And that'll fix all the problems, and they undo all of the things that you were trying to solve with this intergenerational problem.
Well, I was already depressed when I came on your show, and you've made me even more depressed. But you're absolutely right. The same problem is occurring in Australia. I was talking to my niece's husband, who's over from Australia, and I said, is it the land of milk and honey? And he said, nah. I said, what's the biggest problem that you have over there? He said, well, everyone's talking about crime. It's just out of control. And the Indigenous people are at the heart of it. And, of course, the police, just like here, arresting them. They can't lock them up, take them home, and then doing the same thing the next day. If they actually get to court, the judges are useless. They let them out.
Catch and release. Catch and release with no consequences leads to a...
Every one of the offenders here is known to the police by name. They know every one of them.
Yep. I remember, 30 years ago when my cousin was a cop down in Waiuku, he knew if there was a fridge stolen or whiteware, then you go round to that person's house and that's where it'll be. If it was a bike or something like that, a motorbike, well, you go to that person's house and that's where it'll be. He knew them all by name. He knew exactly what they were. And he did old-fashioned police. He went round, knocked on the door, said, all that stuff that you nicked last night from Mrs. Smith, you need to take it back by the close of business today or else. But now that we've got the police driving around in rainbow cars and protecting rainbow crosswalks. They don't want to go and catch actual criminals.
Don't blame the bobbies on the beat for that. That's come from head office, and we all know who that is. That was the guy that our current Minister of Police was going to deal to. I see that's not happened.
No, not yet. But things work slowly with the police. If they work even slower with the politicians, and I think that's where the problem lies. We expect our government to fix everything, to give us guidance on everything. Ronald Reagan, clearly, he was a smart man, and he said the 9 most dreaded words in the English language is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. Yeah.
Must be frustrating for Winston.
Yeah, it must be frustrating for Winston. He probably taught Noah on the ark a few things.
I reckon.
Anyway, Jack, I better take the next call. So thank you very much for calling in to Cam's Buddies, and we'll talk again next week.
See you, Cam. Bye.
See you, bye. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Jimmy. Good to have you back.
Thanks, Cam. How are you this week, mate?
Yeah, perfect. Really good. Had a fantastic Easter. Hope you did too. And, good to be back into the show.
Get stuck into it. Now, what are you talking about this week?
Okay, so you might have seen last week there was a bit of a fuss and bother about Auckland University having safe spaces for Maori and Pacifica, and I'm just interested in what you think about that.
I think it's a disgrace to have rooms assigned by the colour of people's skins. That's a disgrace, and it should be instantly banned. And the government, which funds the university, should instantly look at their funding methods for how they instigate policies into the university. It's insane. Segregation's back, and it's brought to you by the woke left. I think it's a disgrace. I couldn't believe it, actually. That's about, I can't believe how much this country's shifted left in the last 6 years. It's absolutely nuts. So, yeah, that's my take on it. I know people are pretty shocked about it.
Very crazy. But, the university seems unrepentant, and they're talking about they've got prayer spaces for Muslims. They don't mention prayer spaces for Christians or Jews or Hindus or, anybody else or any other type of religion out there, just Muslims. They've got safe spaces for Rainbow, which would be very interesting to see what that looks like, and safe spaces for women. It seems like there's more safe spaces than there are lecture theatres.
The universities are crazy. I mean, they're hiring open communist lecturers, and these people are lecturing at young future business people. It just seems utterly mad how far they've gone. But in saying that, I'm not anti-safe spaces for women or, particularly maybe places based on religion or something, but based on race is just, in a multicultural society, is only going to lead to problems, because how many safe spaces we're going to need in the end. So, a rainbow space, to me, that's okay. I'm not really anti that. I'm not particularly pro it, but I'm just not as anti. But just based on race is insane to me. I'm just appalled by that. In general, I went to Auckland University, and I'm quite ashamed. They send me an email every few months asking for money, and I'm going to respond to the next one with a big FO. But I see on Tuesday that the government announced another 100-day plan from here, setting targets, all good stuff. What's wrong with running the country like this?
Well, I don't have a problem with running. I don't have a problem with running a country like a business at all. It's only the Fruit Loops like Chloe Swarbrick and the Greens who are quick to criticise but never offer any solutions themselves.
Well, all that Luxo's doing is measuring results. What's wrong with measuring results? That's effectively all he's doing. He's instigating policy they believe in and then measuring the results and proving that it's either failing or it's succeeding. Whereas the Ardern regime just got rid of all measurements so they could hide their failings.
Yeah.
So bringing back a government that measures its KPIs or performance what's wrong with that? It's absolutely insane there's people against it.
Yeah.
They should be wanting the government's held to account. Either side. Just they hate the policy, they hate the result, they hate the success. They just want us to be equal losers. Okay? That's what.
That's the thing, isn't it? They do want us to be.
We'll never talk them out of it, so we just have to keep fighting. Margaret Thatcher said, the rust never sleeps, the rust of communism, man.
No, it doesn't. That and socialism, it never sleeps. They're always coming up for some other way to divide society up. And all of the safe spaces for Rainbow and trans and everybody else, including, people of different colours, is all about dividing us, so we're all fighting each other so that they can continue their long march through the institutions.
Well, as depressing as this is, they've been bloody successful. Like you think of all the Wellington institutions that we used to trust. No one trusts any of them anymore. I don't trust the justice system. I don't trust the police anymore. Vandalise a rainbow crossing, it's a hate crime. Vandalise our national document in a secure building, it's a legitimate protest. That's insane.
Yeah, it's nuts, eh?
Yeah, so they have really well marched through our institutions, and I just don't know how you clean it out. And people keep saying this government will do it after a couple of terms, but they've got to really...
No, they've got to do it now and cement it in place so that it can't be overturned. If they wait for 2 terms, then it's only been in place 1 term, and people will be expecting the morons in the Labour Party to overturn it so that they can have their little womble groups carrying on wombling, and we all get to pay for it.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, Wellington, this is a bit of a sidetrack, but Wellington voted 37% Green Party. And when you add in the Labour Party, it was like 60-something%.
Yep.
These are the people that man these institutions. We need to restaff them, shift them. We've talked about this before. Unless you get rid of the culture and the self-belief of these people, you can't change the institution to a more measurable scientific one with results-based. They just so believe in your own failings. I don't know how you fix that.
Well, saying to Jack and to Paul, this is an intergenerational problem that we've got. It starts at schools, and we need to actually change the way schools are. But the trouble is because it's intergenerational, you can put in some policies, but the teachers aren't going to implement them properly, and they'll just wait until they get a union-friendly government come back in, and then all of those things that you're doing to try and improve outcomes disappear. You have to look at what Bill English was trying to do with welfare reform, and all of that got undone when he lost the election, when he failed to negotiate. Yeah, well, I don't know how you fix that, because you can't obviously fire the entire government staff on day one, because you've got to function. You've got to slowly have a way to sort of go through the institutions and fire, rehire, and reculture them. So even changes of governments that will say is more politically neutral, and not. Yeah. So communist, I guess. Yeah, so anyway, that's my thoughts, mate. That was terrible. Auckland University is a disgrace. Yeah, total disgrace. All right, Jimmy, thanks for your comments, and we'll talk again next week. Okay, thank you. Thanks, mate. Bye. I don't think I've got any woke friends at all. It seems university don't have anyone with a real grasp on reality. Perhaps I could hire out my buddies to give advice to corporates and government organisations. Tell us your thoughts on Cam's buddies by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
RCR is on a mission to revive honest media, and now you too can be an integral part of it by joining the RCR Foundation Members Club. Receive exclusive benefits only available to club members, including your own backstage pass to join the hosts for interactive behind-the-scenes discussions, along with our all-new daily curated news summary, RCR Bites, that's delivered to your email box every morning, keeping you on the pulse of the news that matters in just a few minutes per day. To find out more, visit realitycheck.radio /members to see how you can join the mission that's making a difference.
And now it's time for the mailbag. Got quite a few comments today from last week. We'll start with the John Banks interview. We've got a great interview with Banksy. He's on fire. Surely John Banks is one of New Zealand's elder statesmen. And yes, let's all lobby to bring Mallard and Gough home. I love John Banks' boldness on stating what really needs to happen to Gough and Mallard. I also agree with his thoughts on our public service, the need to do something to benefit all New Zealanders. I absolutely love his boldness about the situation for Israel to destroy Hamas. I absolutely agree. Hamas are criminals, and Israel has a right to defend all of its citizens. Israel has every right to fight for its sovereignty. I so agree with John Banks. We have a war right here in New Zealand, the war on the decreased numbers of Bible-believing Christians in New Zealand, and this has and will continue to impact New Zealand negatively. I truly appreciate John Banks' thoughts and passion for the coalition to do well. I not only desire for all our coalition leaders to do well, but I also have to share that God's Holy Spirit impressed my mind that our three leaders need God's wisdom to govern our nation. So I asked our students and members of my church to pray for our coalition leaders. Oh, how much they need God to govern our nation for success. Thank you both for your personal testimonies about your faith in God. Like yourselves, I have much hope for our beautiful country of New Zealand. God is good. In God we entrust our nation, for the God of creation is the God of goodness. Shalom. And that was from Olepa. Another comment about John Banks and his comments on Hamas. Hamas, once they're gone, something worse will replace them. I can't work out why they don't give the hostages back if they're still alive and start peace talks. Remember, they've been oppressed for generations, and this year it will only make more bitter fighters that have seen their whole families and cities destroyed. Jan comments and says, "Hi Cam, what a clear-thinking individual who calls it like it is. We've had a change of government, but now two missions remain. One, bankrupt the corrupt mainstream media and build back better. Two, flush this woke nonsense out of the civil service and refocus them on what they should be doing, serving the people of New Zealand as dictated by an elected parliament." Simple, flush this woke nonsense down the gurgler. Another comment says, I enjoyed your show this week. John Banks had me laughing at his description of the previous government. Totally agree with what he said. I enjoyed listening to Simon O'Connor and remember his speech in Parliament about Ardern's COVID authoritarianism when he told them the people will come to them. And Paul comments, says, great to hear you talking with Banksy. So refreshing to hear truth, wisdom, sense and faith. Keep up the good work. And Jane comments and says, great discussion with Banksy. It's refreshing to hear like-minded people and so much common sense. No wonder so much mainstream media stuff is losing support. People are sick of the lies. Marilyn writes in and says, I just listened to the replay of your talk with John Banks. Awesome and refreshing. So I enjoyed the straight talk and putting it as it is. God bless you and thank you. And Ruth, as the final comment on John Banks's interview, one of the things I like about RCR is the civil discourse interviewers such as yourself have with your guests, even if they are not really in the freedom camp much at all. A good example was your panel discussion the other week. Those guys touched on some things that Labor did wrong, but in my opinion, they still have COVID blinkers on about the greater issues at stake. However, it's good to hear points of view I don't personally agree with, discussed in a convivial and respectful manner. I can bear to listen to dialogue conducted in such a way. I enjoyed your chats with John Banks and Simon O'Connor. Good to hear the viewpoints of people with first-hand experience in the political fray. Thanks for being a calm and polite interviewer. I like your respectful approach and the way you listen to your guests without interruption. Keep up the good work, Cam. Now, some comments about the interview with Simon O'Connor. Great interview, read the protest. I don't believe that even if MPs came out to listen, that anything would have changed the narrative or Jacinda's plans. Easter blessings. And that's from Brenda in Nelson. Dave comments and says, I have great respect for Simon as a good MP and enjoyed your interview, but the elephant in the room was not brought up. Simon, did you sign the agreement not to talk to the protesters? Well, only the leaders signed that, Dave. So Simon wasn't in a position to agree or disagree. The leaders made the mind up and told their MPs that that was what had been decided. Colin and Kelly write and say, thanks for great, intelligent discussions with interesting people today. Great listening. And Raywin from Tauranga says, happy Sabbath, Cam. I'm just listening to your replay of your interview with Simon O'Connor. I wish I'd heard him talk so openly before. All I knew of him was thanks to the media outrage re his view on Roe versus Wade, and thought then I'd like to hear more from this man, but sadly never did. My goodness, what a loss to good moral politics he is. But then again, maybe he just doesn't fit in now. Luxon declares he's a Christian, but he's not, and doesn't even know he's not. He seems to just run with the foxes and hunt with the hounds, and he's just another UN puppet. I'd like to hear more from Simon, please. Always love your shows. God bless you. Lee writes in and says, Cam, you interviewed Simon O'Connor, and I wanted to watch your interview because I remember a speech he made in Parliament a few years ago, a powerful speech. And I was so disappointed with the interview. No direct discussion, though you did try. You more or less fell into a position of agreeing with him without giving him the hard talk. So no digging deep in this interview. You did raise the major incident at Parliament grounds. Thank you. Simon's response was a bit blasé, which shocked me so much. I've decided not to follow his Substack anymore. Had to share. Keep up the good work you're doing. Blessings. Anonymous comment says the interview is RCR Gold, well-mannered and extremely informative. Very helpful to understand the background of events. RCR is at its best doing this. Thank you so much to all the team for such valued work. Keep up the good work. And we've got a few comments from Facebook. Melanie says, Simon is all for the cashless society and made it clear. Chris says, cowardice pure and simple. Teresa says, great interview. Always enjoyed listening to Simon debating in Parliament. He's a good man. And Charmaine adds, agreed, Cam. People really wanted to be listened to and their concerns taken seriously. They had no option but to protest. And the final comment is about the Cam's Buddy segment on the Serious Fraud Office losing a third case. And this says, wow, that's interesting about the Serious Fraud Office going for Winston. I can see this in hindsight now. Lawfare. Thanks, Cam. My evening entertainment. Happy Easter. And that's the mailbag for this week. That's it for the Crunch this week, and what fun discussions we had too. I've always enjoyed talking education with Alwyn Poole. He has some very practical ideas, and the proof of those ideas work. If only the education ministry would listen. And once again, Gary Moller delivers good, healthy advice. My life and body have improved hugely since taking on board Gary's advice. You can do it too. It just takes the will to make changes for yourself. If I can start eating fruits and smoothies, then anyone can. This is why Reality Check Radio exists, so we can share these interesting characters with you all. I learn so much from my guests, and you can too. And you can keep up with all my shows, and indeed all of our shows, by using the RCR app. And you can even use the app to stream live. So a big thanks to the team that puts this show together and makes it all work. It's been a real pleasure again having you all back this week. And I'm loving all your feedback and really enjoying talking to so many people sharing their thoughts on politics, life, health, and everything in between. So a big shout out to all of you. Thank you for listening and having faith in me and RCR as we continue this beautiful game of politics. Don't forget, email suggestions to inbox@Reality Check Radio for ideas and people for me to interview. And let's make this show the best political show in New Zealand. Stay tuned for a repeat of Rodney Hyde's Real Talk coming up next, followed by a replay of Truth Speaker with Tobias Tahi. Look forward to having you join me again next week for The Crunch with Cam Slater.
You've been listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater. Remember, you can check out the replays for today's show on our website at www.realitycheck.radio/replays. Tune in every Thursday at 4 p.m. for more with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.